Coming from an alternate universe where the Spider Island event wound up being permanent, Tony Stark was initially transformed into a human spider hybrid under the control of the villainous Spider Queen. During a battle with the Resistance, however, Tony was sprayed with the same goblin formula that had corrupted the mind of Norman Osborn, transforming Tony Stark into the Iron Goblin, with a mechanical new costume to match. And while this version of Tony would eventually decide to sacrifice himself in a last moment of humanity before his goblin insanity fully took over, the combination of Iron Man and Green Goblin tech is still a pretty terrifying combo that Spider-Man should hope never reappears. Coming in at number 9, we have the corrupted Iron Man from the controversial 90s event, The Crossing. When a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves, Iron Man became a sleeper agent within the Avengers and eventually attacked his companions outright after secretly manipulating them for years. While eventually defeated by a time-traveling 19-year-old version of himself, and then retconned into Tony going back to his usual status quo in the Marvel Universe, this controversial storyline shows what would happen if Iron Man truly turned out to be a traitor. Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Thor. During the event that saw God Emperor Doom in control of a Marvel universe converted into a new Battleworld, Doom maintained his complete control over the many realms of Battleworld with a police force army known as the Thor Corps. One of the most powerful of Doom's personal army was the being known as Iron Thor, wearing a combination of the Iron Man armor and Thor's iconic helmet, and investigating any potential rebellions to his master Doom's rule. Even capable of wielding Mjolnir, this super powerful character still managed to be murdered by the hero Warrior Woman as an example of rebellion against Emperor Doom. He might have had a short life, but man, I really love that Iron Thor design.
At number 7, we have the time when Iron Man escapes the black hole created when Godkiller self-destructs. What's embarrassing about this event is that Godkiller's intentions are to take Iron Man with it in the blast created by its own self-destruction, and it's very sure that it'll accomplish this task considering Iron Man is aboard it. Godkiller is basically a giant suit of armor and Iron Man is in it. That's strangely hard to explain, but I think you know what I mean. And I don't blame Godkiller for having high expectations for this final feat, considering the black hole it ends up creating is the size of Earth, meaning that it would have 24 times the mass of the sun. So that means that the only thing Godkiller miscalculates, much like everyone else on this list, is Iron Man's strength, speed, and durability. And yeah, Iron Man comes flying out of the black hole, escaping the close call with his life completely intact. And that means that Godkiller obliterates himself basically for nothing, allowing Iron Man to escape to safety, despite the pull of 24 suns on his back. Godkiller gets absolutely owned here, but at least he's not alone. He's got the other 9 villains on this list to talk it out with.
Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Iron Patriot, aka Norman Osborn. Best known as being the alter ego of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn has long been one of the biggest threats in the Marvel Universe, manipulating events from afar as the CEO of Oscorp. Following the invasion of Earth by the Skrull army, Norman found himself suddenly in the public eye and with goodwill after being the one to personally defeat the Skrull Queen. Norman would use this influence to lead the Dark Avengers as the Iron Patriot, a twisted version of Iron Man combined with Captain America's patriotism that tricked the public into trusting Norman, and showing that Tony Stark is definitely not the worst billionaire in the Marvel world.
Halfway through into number 5, Daredevil. In the aftermath of the Axis storyline I mentioned earlier, Tony remains swamped and starts using his tech for even more personal gain than before. Yeah, he's not evil exactly, but he's certainly not above getting all of San Francisco addicted to his new gene rewriting extremist app. Daredevil, who recently relocated to the city after being barred from practicing law in New York, doesn't like this for some reason, almost as if he has a conscience. But when he first confronts Tony in his new island mansion, the armored Avenger just tosses Matt Murdock into the ocean. Just flings him right out the window. They have another fight later on that is an actual fight, but Tony ends up winning yet again. 2 issues later though, Tony actually ends up saving Daredevil from falling off a building, but then traps him in armor and wipes his memory of all the bad things that he's discovered about Tony, so I don't think he did it for Matt's sake.
Coming in at number 4, we have the superior Iron Man. During an event known as Axis, many Marvel heroes and villains had their morality completely inverted, with good guys becoming bad, bad guys becoming good, and so on and so forth. One of the few changes that wasn't reversed by the end of the event, however, was the morality of Iron Man, who in his evil form still possessed all of the intelligence and dark aspects of Tony's personality, and managed to build a shield for himself to prevent being turned into a hero again. Infecting much of the planet with a new version of the Extremis virus, and using artificially intelligent drones to assert his dominance, this version of Tony was only finally cured by the Marvel Universe's collapse into Battleworld resetting his morals, meaning that this was a villain that the rest of the Avengers didn't even manage to properly defeat.
Which brings us to number 3, when Iron Man totally humiliates this fleet of guys wearing power suits that they think could combat his own. With their suits having the same firepower as some small countries, they expect there's no way Tony Stark could match up against them. In fact, Tony is even wearing his classic armor, which isn't quite as powerful as his updated suit, so they even have a better chance than usual to even the score. And still, they're made to look like fools, as Iron Man easily evades their heat-seeking missiles and diverts them to actually backfire and destroy the armored assailants themselves. It's just an absolute joke watching him face off against these guys, carrying them around like they're action figures and throwing insults at them, and they seem so confident. That's what kills me about this list, is how confident all these villains are before Iron Man shows them who's boss. It just makes the wins all more embarrassing when they come.
Coming in at number 2, we have the evil Emperor Stark. Hailing from the destroyed world of Earth 42777, this version of Iron Man was perhaps the cruelest the multiverse had ever seen, as he manipulated Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants into declaring war on humanity, then used the resulting anti-mutant backlash to secure power as the world's only superhero. Holding entire countries hostage with natural disasters and even spreading plagues among his own citizens, this version of Tony declared himself Emperor Stark, taking the cloak of Doctor Doom as a final trophy. This was Iron Man at his most evil, and he was an incredibly powerful threat when encountered by the multiverse-traveling Exiles, only eventually defeated by his own universe's last superhero survivor, Sue Storm. A tragic end for a tragic villain. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Zombie Iron Man. When Earth 2149 was first hit by the zombie plague that's since been highlighted in multiple Marvel spin-off series, this version of Iron Man attempted to use teleportation technology to escape to a different universe with Nick Fury. However, a zombified Fantastic Four arrived too quickly for this plan, and Tony was bitten, becoming a living corpse inside his metal armor and developing a bloodlust and pure hunger for human flesh. Still surviving even after having his legs blasted off by the Silver Surfer, the zombified Iron Man would go on to lead the rest of the undead heroes and villains in an attack against Galactus and gain this universe's power cosmic, meaning he could now pursue more flesh throughout the entire universe and bring the zombie plague to the rest of the doomed cosmos.
Number 10, Outsmarted. One of the most famous fights between the Hulk and the Thing also happens to be one of the first. This one goes down in Fantastic Four issue number 12, where the Fantastic Four are led to believe that the Hulk is the one behind a bunch of destruction, an attempt to get together to try and stop him. However, this does not end up working out very well. That's because the Hulk is not only the strongest there is, but he also manages to outsmart them almost completely. Hulk realizes that the FF have the advantage, since together they are very powerful, but if he can take them on one by one, then he stands a better chance at defeating them. That's right, it wasn't even his brute strength, but his strategy that allowed him to defeat the Fantastic Four this time around. Well, almost. The Thing seemingly defeats the Hulk with his piledriver punch, but in reality, his punch misses, and it was actually an energy ray that hit the Hulk and knocked him out. Fortunately though, this reveals to the FF that the Hulk was not behind all the destruction, and yeah. They can at least now go after the people that are actually responsible. Number 9, Illuminate the Truth. In the secondary short comic that is included in the World War Hulk prologue Worldbreaker, titled Round Trip, we get to see an alternate Hulk embarrass a group he refers to as the Illuminators, obviously the more cartoonish version of the Illuminati. This group ends up sending Hulk to space and another planet in a spaceship, ultimately because he stole Namor's sandwich. How does Hulk embarrass them? In a similar fashion to his plan in the reality of Earth 616, he ends up heading homeward after the group exiles him. Here, he doesn't necessarily seem to have the same trauma behind him as he does on 616, fueling his rage even more, but the Illuminators are still completely in a tizzy over the fact that the Hulk ship seems to be on a return course after they sent him away. Except Namor. Namor feels safe knowing that he lives deep in the ocean and that if the surface world gets all smashed up, he and his kingdom will probably still be good.
Number 10. Claw. Claw, which is Hulk backwards, is basically what happens when the Hulk goes Hulk. He is another one of the evil personalities inside Bruce Banner's head. This version of Hulk has black skin with these rad glowing red scars. He has red demonic eyes, white hair, and big old talons. Claw emerges when Hulk reaches a sufficient level of rage, which is strange because regular Hulk has gotten way more powerful than this version of Hulk. The Claw personality is usually suppressed and has only shown up a few times, and not for very long I might add. He appeared first in the Axis storyline where heroes and villains had their morality switched. Hulk isn't exactly always a perfect dude. He will go on rampages and hurt people. He doesn't intend to. Over time, he has been able to hone his rampages into one target, or even not rampage like that at all. But since Claw is his opposite, he lets his rage hurt and maim everyone, putting even the villains on alert. He looks terrifyingly awesome and no one is safe from his rage. Number 9. Infernal Hulk. On Earth 11638, Bruce Banner was officially completely done with dealing with the unpredictability and rage of the Hulk. So, when Spider-Man introduced Bruce to Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, Banner became his apprentice, and after lots of training in the mystic arts, learned how to separate himself from the Hulk entity. He did this by sending it to hell and making it a demon. And this was a great solution, until the 616 Hulk, along with Deadpool and Spider-Man, came to Earth 11638. The Infernal Hulk managed to enter back into the realm of Earth, swapping places with 616 Banner's Hulk persona. Infernal Hulk went after the new Sorcerer Supreme, Bruce Banner, who was saved by both Deadpool and Spider-Man. So, how did they defeat this demon Hulk? Well, Sorcerer Bruce reversed the banishing spell that sent Hulk to hell, and just before Infernal Hulk could return to his original Bruce Banner body, Bruce had his neck snapped, killing him. But his spirit lived on in the astral plane, so it's all good. Number 8. Marvel Apes. Marvel Apes is, well, I mean, it's all the Marvel characters as apes. It's pretty self-explanatory actually. After Marvel Zombies, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing about, Marvel wanted another cool and weird alternate universe. So we got this. I actually really like it, but I'm a sucker for alternate worlds. Like the regular Hulk, this ape Hulk was a big green monstrosity. He resembled a big gorilla and he was obviously furry. So that's like the main difference. He was still the strongest ape out there and extremely prone to smashing things whenever he got upset. This ape Hulk helped in the battle against the vampiric ape Avengers and would later join a group dubbed the Prime 8, led by Nick Fury.
Coming in number 10, we've got Spider-Man. A cursory Google search will reward you with a plethora of insane clickbait homebrew animations, pitting Spider-Man against the Hulk in the lowest resolution possible. Ah, the internet. Is there no end to your ridiculous cash grabs? Remember the era of Spider-Man Elsa videos? What a time to be alive. However, the bouts between Spider-Man and Hulk don't end at cheesy animations and gaming channels. There are indeed a few fights between the two in official Marvel stories. Cool, popular, and versatile as Spider-Man is, there really isn't a way for him to beat the Brute in head-to-head combat. He's got super strength and spidey senses, but that's not enough to take out a towering monster of flesh and gamma radiation. He's used his smarts to great effect in the past, putting other heroes' technology and strategies to use and defeating overpowered opponents. There are instances of Spider-Man outmaneuvering Hulk too. And there was also the time that he had some godly cosmic powers, but that's not exactly fair, is it? However, in the end, our green pal will likely come out on top of any fight between these two. Most times, Spidey would be best just to hide out until the Hulk leads. If he's less lucky, he'll get walloped and pass out, which has happened a couple times. The Hulk is pretty strong. Coming at number 9, we've got Wolverine. Say it isn't so. The Hulk and Wolverine never would fight. They're both so friendly and easy to get along with. I almost had you for a second, didn't I? Now, these two are almost contractually obliged to duke it out from time to time now, aren't they? Going way back to the era before Wolverine was even an official X-Men, this duo would fight over just about anything, and it really could go either way. Like, Wolverine has beaten the Hulk before, albeit in the grim dark universe of Old Man Logan, but in most cases, James Howlett loses out to the Hulk. Sure, he's technically invincible and will always bounce back in one way or another, well, most of the time. There's no dealing with brute force that the Hulk has to offer. Way back before Wolverine was even introduced in X-Men, the two fought with the Hulk refusing to back down. Then there's the time that the Hulk returned from space looking to exact some revenge on those who would send him out there. Wolverine definitely had his butt kicked this time in particular. And who could forget the legendary rip and tear fest that was Hulk versus Wolverine atop a mountain in Tibet. God, Hulk really let him have it that time, didn't he? Limbs were removed and tossed to different mountaintops, and legs were threatened to be eaten. Not a good look for our pal Wolverine now, is it? But what can you do? Beating the Hulk isn't something most folks even have a chance at. Coming at number 8, we've got Iron Man. Wait, aren't these guys both founding Avengers? Why would they ever have to fight? Well, that's the thing, there's always a reason or two. They've got big, science-centered brains and plenty of power for sure. However, Tony Stark tends to get on people's nerves and also makes a bunch of decisions without consulting others. The Hulk does not take well to this, not one bit. So of course the guy with the craziest technology is going to have to take on the sheer physical might of a creature that thrives on anger. It's just gotta happen. And fight they do, but here's the thing. It's not often that Iron Man scores a decisive victory or even a victory at all. No matter how powerful and advanced he makes his weaponry, no matter how far ahead he plans to fight the Hulk, he comes with some inherent limits. His tech will eventually run out of juice, get damaged, or reach a predetermined limit. You can't really make stuff push too far past the limits of the materials it's made of. Hulk, on the other hand, will always be getting angrier and therefore stronger. He's like a perpetual motion machine of rage and fury. So even with the Hulkbuster suits, darts to sap strength, and a bevy of other interesting anti-Hulk technology, eventually this will all run out, leaving the Hulk to do what he will. It's happened time and time again, muscle beats machinery in this case. There's that time that Stark sent Hulk off into the universe, I guess, but that resulted in World War Hulk, which wasn't very fun for anyone on planet Earth. Whoops. Coming in at number 7, She-Hulk. Speaking of World War Hulk, funny how that works, right? One would think that Hulk loves his cousin too much to fight her. They have a long, strong history together, essentially treating each other as siblings, and don't often get mad, with each other anyways, despite the anger inherent in their powers. Hell, Bruce Banner is the reason that She-Hulk is the way she is. After an emergency blood transfusion, Jennifer Walters is endowed with a less intense version of Bruce Banner's condition, like a watered down Hulk. Still plenty powerful and possibly the strongest woman in Marvel, but she's not quite a match for Bruce's monster. However, like I was saying before, why would they ever fight? They're family. Well, World War Hulk changed the way the Hulk saw the world. Totally fueled by anger and revenge, he came back to Earth a changed being. And coming across his cousin, he felt no remorse in slamming her so hard into the ground that the Earth around her was turned into a crater. Holy smokes, Hulk, no mercy, eh? Coming in number 6, we've got Loki. I feel like this moment cemented the Avengers as the premier attraction in Marvel's budding cinematic universe. Back before we had any confirmation of Infinity Stones or gauntlets, we had the Tesseract. Loki, god of mischief and brother to the mighty Thor, used this object to cause all sorts of mayhem. This wasn't his only trick, but it worked particularly well. Being a god, Loki was pretty cocky though. What could Earth's heroes do to stop me, he thought. Well, the Hulk had something to say about that. He tossed the so-called puny god around like a child with a doll having a temper tantrum. Got some chuckles, inspired some memes, the works. However, this little fight had been hotly contested. Loki, again, a literal god, likely wouldn't have been hurt by this interaction at all. Like, would the Hulk have even had an effect on him? Stranger things have happened for sure. This moment might have just been played for laughs to ensure an audience hit, but hey, Hulk did indeed beat the snot out of Loki in this particular instance. Coming in number 5, we've got The Thing. Strong arm versus strong arm. A classic trope, a legendary fight. Other than Wolverine, I'd say The Thing is one of the Hulk's most lasting hero opponents. Both considered immortal, unbeatable, impossible to damage, this is a heavyweight bout like no other. However, the Hulk definitely takes precedence when he's in revenge mode. So when he wanted to go and find and fight the Avengers, the Fantastic Four stepped in. Benjamin Grimm wanted a piece of the gamma-saturated super, so the two decided to throw down on their own. After an exchange of massive blows, eventually the Thing did drop. It's gotta hurt fighting the Hulk, but at least he can take a hit. Coming in number 4, the Avengers. Yes, all of them. And that's the thing, this seems to happen quite often. Nobody really knows how to deal with the Hulk, and this is an issue that rears its ugly head quite often. Even though he is often part of the group himself, if things go a little sideways, it's not unlike the Hulk to decide to go solo after working out some frustration. And by working out frustration, I do mean slapping his former comrades around. He can do that no problem too, the Hulk is strong. Why else would Tony Stark constantly be dreaming up contingency plans related to the bulky boy? But yeah, the Avengers don't often beat Hulk if they have to take him on. Usually it's making him turn back into Bruce Banner or getting him as far away from the fight as possible, and when that doesn't work, the Hulk beats folks down and leaves. Simple as that. Coming in number 3, we've got Doctor Strange. You would think that the Sorcerer Supreme would be able to deal with a meathead no problem, a spell or two and the problem's done with. However, again, during World War Hulk, the rage proved to be a little too much. Holy moly, Hulk, calm down, why don't ya? Strange often sends Hulk to different dimensions or far away if it looks like things are getting too rough. In this fight, he decides to channel a universe-destroying demon to give him that upper hand. It seems to be working at first, but as is the case with many fights involving last-ditch efforts against the Hulk, the new powers can only last so long. When Strange starts to lose control of this demonic power, the Hulk is just getting angrier, and when Hulk gets mad, he gets strong. With this in mind, I'm sure you can guess what happens next. Doctor Strange, unconscious. Coming in number 2, we've got the Silver Surfer. No, not Silver Surfer, Herald of Galactus, wielder of powers beyond mortal understanding. But it's true, Hulk did indeed take out this incredible hero, although it was under some very unique circumstances. Some very zombie circumstances, in fact. Showing up just in time to see the world totally gripped by the zombie apocalypse, he does his best to help out. The number of heroes attempting to eat him proves to be too much though, and he's overwhelmed before the Hulk arrives. Using his massive size and strength to push through the crowd, Hulk consumes Silver Surfer, gaining a bit of his power cosmic along the way. Yikes. And finally at number 1, we've got Sentry. Sentry should be Earth's strongest warrior. After being imbued with the powers of a super soldier serum hundreds of thousands of times stronger than the original, he became incredibly powerful. Almost too powerful if you ask me. Thing is, this kind of strength is only barely enough to handle the Hulk. When the Hulk and his Warbound came to Earth, Sentry was there to fight him. However, they essentially fought each other to a standstill, with each reverting back to their human form. But even after all that, Bruce Banner gets the last hit in. Classic.
Number 8, To Hear You Scream. Speaking of World War Hulk, one of the most embarrassing fights comes from the very beginning of that event, in World War Hulk issue number 1, when Hulk faces off against Black Bolt. Black Bolt and his queen Medusa, you see, have some ego, which ends up quickly turning into hubris for them. Black Bolt had fought the Hulk before and won, so it was for this reason that they barely even gave Hulk the time of day when he shows up. When Hulk rushes them both, angry for what has happened to his people and the planet that he freed and made his own, Black Bolt only responds with a whisper, saying, "Enough," and with the force of his words pushing Hulk far back. But Hulk ends up coming out on top as he immediately recovers and leaps back at Black Bolt. He didn't come to Attilan for a whisper, he came to hear Black Bolt scream, and it definitely seems like he makes him scream. He does not look like he's in great shape after that conversation. Number 7, size isn't everything. It really isn't in terms of battle, as is proven in the Ultimates issue number 5. You see, in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Hulk isn't exactly a hero. Here the Avengers are known as the Ultimates, although there is also an Avengers team in this reality, but trust me, they aren't quite the heroic equivalent to the 616 team that we know. But the Ultimates pretty much are that. As Hulk goes on a rampage downtown, the Ultimates must band together in an effort to defeat him. And to be clear, in this reality, Hulk isn't on the Ultimates. The first one up to bat to try to tackle this big beast is Giant Man, aka Hank Pym. He attempts to defeat the Hulk as, well, a giant man. But just because Hulk is smaller than Hank doesn't mean he can't still pack a punch. While Giant Man attempts to hold Hulk beneath his hands and ask him to calm down, also calling him puny, Hulk responds by jumping onto Giant Man's face and threatening to rip his head off and use it like a toilet bowl, before punching his lights out. Proving that, yeah, even if you think, well, I'm a lot bigger than the Hulk, it doesn't mean that the Hulk can't mess you up. Number 6, Bustin' makes me feel not so good. In the case of Tony Stark, that is. While the Hulkbuster became a famous suit of armor in the Avengers film franchise, we also know it from the comics. During the events of World War Hulk, Tony attempted to use this armor to defeat the Hulk when he returned to Earth and threatened to destroy it if he wasn't given the heroes responsible for sending him into space. One of which who was responsible was Tony, who actually initially created the Illuminati group that sent the Hulk away. Tony had also created nanotech, which would in theory be capable of suppressing the Hulk's powers, actually even forcibly using it on Jennifer Walters previously, which she actually sued him for in return. However, the Hulkbuster, the nanosuppressant, even the big bombs that they attempted to use all did nothing. Hulk's pain was so intense, his anger so great, that he became powerful enough to survive all of this and remain in his Hulk form. So apparently it doesn't matter how smart you are, Tony, or how prepared. In the end, if Hulk wants to smash, he's going to continue to smash. You can't Hulk bust your way out of that one. Number 5. J'accuse. Blade is one of the newest members of the Avengers main roster, and being new, it seems that he doesn't quite understand how best to deal with other Avengers members, like former and founding Avenger member the Hulk. While Hulk is on a rampage, the Avengers attempt to intercede in Immortal Hulk issue 47, and Blade thinks he has it all figured out. He thinks that Hulk has actually been transformed into a vampire thanks to his new/old powers like being stronger at night and being able to return from the dead. Blade might know vampires, but that doesn't mean he's always right when it comes to his suspicions. Hulk's response to Blade's accusation? To ask him if he can turn into a bat, being that Blade is also part vampire. Blade responds with no, and Hulk tells him it's a good time to learn as he tosses him up high and away. He's like, hey, can you do that? You can't? Great. Bye. Number 4. Hot tubbing. While some people might focus on when Hulk beat Thor in Thor Ragnarok in the MCU when it comes to embarrassing moments, I think there is one that tops that. After the fight, Thor is taken to Hulk's private quarters, where his wounds are tended to. When he awakes with a start, he notices Hulk is also there in what appears to be a hot tub? Hulk hot tub. Thor asks Hulk about how he ended up here, and when he finds out that he crash landed on Sakaar via a Quinjet, asks him where the Quinjet is. Hulk responds by getting up out of the tub and crossing the room to where the window is to show Thor the current location of the Quinjet now. This is when Thor learns that Hulk was, naked in that hot tub, which prompts him to seemingly avert his eyes and remark on how that image is now permanently burned into his mind. Yeah, he looks pretty uncomfortable and pretty embarrassed. Oh boy. Number 3. Love frenzy. There was that one time Bruce Banner as the Hulk completely lost it, going into a frenzy that caused him to try and both chase down and beat up She-Hulk. And not only that either. It turns out this whole attempt to do so was actually kind of part of a mating ritual thing. It seems that Hulk forgot that She-Hulk was his cousin, because he was in a frenzied Hulk form. Luckily, Hulk didn't get his way here and was eventually set right again. Although in the Old Man Logan universe, the two do apparently end up together, and we don't really know if Jen was here for that or not. Either way, the whole ordeal is pretty embarrassing for Jen, but also likely embarrassing for Bruce as well if he was told about it afterwards. It's just embarrassing all around, and also pretty, squicky. Ugh. Number 2. Ripped in Two. Wow, I like how I made number 2 ripped in two. I didn't do that on purpose, but that's good. When Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate Hulk fought one another in the Ultimate Universe, Hulk pretty much put Wolverine to shame. In this alternate universe of Earth 1610, Wolverine was hired by Nick Fury to track down the Hulk. Wolverine tracked him down alright, but wasn't so good at dealing with him once he did. At one point, Hulk tears Wolverine straight down the middle and tosses his legs so far away that Logan has a challenging time recovering them. And of course I mean right down the middle, not down the middle this way, down across the middle, I guess I should say. In this reality, Wolverine can't just grow new legs, by the way. In order to recover, he needs to find and basically reattach his legs so that his healing powers, or his survival powers more can basically take effect and kick in and heal him. So yeah, he had to crawl all the way over to find his legs in the snow. Great. Also, mountains. There were mountains there. Number 1. Why are you hitting yourself? While Thor and Hulk fought in Ragnarok, where Hulk only really won against Thor thanks to the help of Grandmaster, tasing Thor until he passed out, just as he was figuring out how to harness the power of lightning without his hammer too, in the comics these two have fought actually multiple times. One such occasion involved a showdown where Hulk made fun of Thor for having long hair, mistaking him for a hairy lady and telling him that he should get a haircut. Thor of course did not take too kindly to these remarks about his long golden locks, which he quite loves, and fought back against Hulk with his hammer Mjolnir. However, Thor ended up surprised when Hulk refused to surrender, claiming he was the strongest there will ever be, before grabbing Thor's hammer arm and then making Thor basically hit himself with Mjolnir. Ouch.
Number 7. Maestro. Okay, imagine a version of the Hulk with twice his strength who retains the intelligence of Bruce Banner. Now, take that Hulk and make him a ruthless, tyrannical ruler, power-hungry and evil, and you get Maestro. Our Hulk first comes into contact with him when Rick Jones' daughter takes him into the future to fight his evil future self. But this Maestro easily overpowers the Hulk. In their very first fight, Maestro went to town on the Hulk and won by simply snapping Hulk's neck. That's it. Game over, man! Game over! He then waited for Hulk to heal, taunting him and villain monologuing at him the whole time about all the terrible things they go through as the Hulk, trying to get Hulk to join his side. The only way our Hulk could win was to bring Maestro back in time, to when they gained their abilities. The Gamma Bomb, which destroyed Maestro on an atomic scale. The sheer idea of Hulk becoming Maestro haunted Bruce and Hulk's thoughts for the rest of time. Number 6. Null, Breaker of Worlds. When Kull Borson, known as the Serpent, who was the villainous brother of Odin, sent down 7 magical hammers to Earth that represented his 7 followers, the hammer Null found its way to our hulking mass of green, transforming him into Null, Breaker of Worlds. Null went rampaging all over South America, bringing him into conflict with the Avengers, who he defeated, and eventually into a fight with Thor. When fighting Thor, Null teamed up with Angrir, Breaker of Souls, which was the Thing, who also got one of these hammers, who was defeated by Thor. But we all know who the strongest Avenger is, don't we? Null was just a bit too powerful for Thor, and instead of facing him one-on-one, the God of Thunder threw Hulk into orbit. He landed in Transylvania and started taking on Dracula and his minions. It was only after Inca, disguised as Betty Ross, showed up that Hulk threw the hammer aside and left to go be in solitude for being used yet again. Number 5. Hulk 2099. Most of us comic book fans know about Spider-Man 2099. It's an incredible story and character, and it was crazy successful. Because of this, Marvel wanted to capitalize, like you do, and they made more 2099 versions of their characters. One such character was Hulk. This version of the Hulk is actually a guy named John Eisenhart. John didn't get his powers after being a scientist though. In the world of 2099, there was a cult known as the Knights of Banner, which, to sidetrack for a second, is a pretty sweet name. But anyways, John was a studio executive and the Knights of Banner wanted to create another Hulk while also making a movie about their cult's history. Yeah, it's weird, I don't know. Eisenhart joins the cult and gets caught in a gamma explosion, turning him into the Hulk. He was a bit different though. For starters, he is terrifying, but he can control his rage, meaning his strength didn't grow indefinitely. He also has claws that can slice through most materials, and his freaky elongated tongue is super strong, which is weird. Number 4. Hulk Venom. In What If number 4, what if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? Spider-Man is unable to get rid of the Venom symbiote suit, and he enlists aid from other heroes. Hulk just happens to be one of the first to show up, and the symbiote takes an instant liking to Hulk, which kinda makes me wonder why this hasn't happened before, honestly. It easily bonds to Hulk, overpowering his weak mind. So now you have all the powers of Hulk, plus the powers of Spider-Man, which is an interesting idea, truth be told. Number 3. Skulk. The Amalgam comics in the 90s brought the fans one of the things they always wished they had: the heroes of the DC universe and the Marvel universe coming together. It saw the heroes facing each other, but it also, more interestingly, saw mashed together versions of characters. It's how we got the Batman-Wolverine hybrid Dark Claw, who is awesome. But it's also how we got Skulk. Skulk was the combination of Solomon Grundy and the Hulk. Bruce Banner was minding his own business, conducting gamma bond tests in the desert, the kind of thing you do on your perfect Sunday, and then Solomon Grundy appeared. Bruce tried to save the superhuman zombie from the explosion, but the bomb fused the two together, forming Skulk. Skulk was really just Solomon Grundy but with the Hulk's iconic purple pants, but I feel like the powers of these two characters fused together should be way more awesome than this. Number 2. Ultimate Hulk. Yes, the Ultimate Universe's version of Hulk is similar to the regular Hulk, but his personality? Nuh-uh, honey, it is whack. Bruce Banner, no matter where you find him, is an emotionally scarred dude. It's why he is the way he is, but the Ultimate Bruce Banner? He is selfish, self-absorbed, and just creepy. He was so desperate to be noticed and recognized, he willingly injected himself with an experimental version of a new super soldier formula, turning him into a monstrous version of the Hulk. This Hulk had little to no regard for human life and collateral damage. He even ate people, it was nuts. Ultimate Hulk would join up with Maker, Quicksilver, Kang, and a mind-controlled Human Torch to make up the team known as the Dark Ultimates. He would eventually align himself to be a bit better, but not by much. Number 1. Guilt Hulk. The Guilt Hulk is very similar to Devil Hulk, who represents his anger. Only this version of Hulk represents all the guilt and regret that the Hulk feels for all the horrible things he has inadvertently done while in his Hulk form, as well as the horrible things done to him as Bruce, like being shunned and feared and all the horrible things that were done to him by his father, Brian Banner, which is a huge reason behind Bruce having multiple personality disorder in the first place. Because this persona represents all these things, it's actually more powerful than the Devil Hulk persona. Guilt Hulk even took on the form of Bruce's father inside his head before becoming his true form, which is like a weird xenomorph looking Hulk. This Hulk is incredibly powerful, and it took the combined efforts of many of Bruce's other alter egos to hold and keep the other Guilt Hulk persona repressed deep in Bruce's mind.
Number 10. Venom's deadly French kiss. Venom is already known for being a brutal and twisted character in general, especially when he acts as a villain, yet he's still one of the most popular characters around, no matter his alignment. In 2003's Venom in issue 11, we saw him take on the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and use a weird talent we didn't really need to know that he had. Venom is attempting to drag away Spider-Man's unconscious body when the Thing bursts through a wall, aiming to prevent him from doing so by tackling him. Venom responds by telling the Thing it's blobberin' time and shoots out his tongue, essentially giving the Thing an immobilizing and disturbingly painful looking French kiss. Fortunately, Human Torch comes in on the next page to put a stop to Venom, but this graphic image won't be as easily burned away. In fact, just the opposite. It'll be burned into your mind. The cover of this issue says it all, featuring just Venom's long and slimy looking tongue. Ew. Number 9. Loki and Thor brutalize the Fantastic Four. This one came to us from a What If story where we saw both Loki and Thor team up to take on Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. During this fight, we got a brutal moment where Ben Grimm, as the Thing, tries to shout out his famous catchphrase while battling Thor. It's clobberin' time! But before he can get that final word out, time, Thor smashes his jaw off with his hammer. Youch. Meanwhile, Invisible Woman Sue Storm is also in trouble. She is attempting to protect herself using a force field she created, but Loki reverses the polarity of her powers, so all the energy she is projecting outward instead folds in on her, causing her to be crushed beneath its weight and looking almost skeletal as a result in one panel. She's like, I'm dying. Number 8. Gamora kills Eros. In a surprising turn of events, Gamora was forced to take the life of her uncle Star Fox following the revelation that the Black Order would be using him and not Gamora, as he had previously thought, to bring Thanos back to life. Much to the dismay of Star-Lord, Gamora did not hesitate to kill her uncle Eros, Thanos' brother, though at least she did seem sorry to have to do it. But if it meant preventing Thanos' return, well, then she was more willing to do the deed, stabbing Star Fox right through the chest with her sword. Number 7. Kitty is forced to kill Wolverine. Kitty's kills can be pretty gruesome when they happen because of her phasing powers. In this story, Kitty was forced to kill Wolverine when he couldn't be saved from being used as Hydra's brainwashed agent in What If: Wolverine, Enemy of the State. Wolverine has been teleporting in, assassinating tons of Hydra's opponents, aka superheroes, and teleporting out. A team is then pulled together to finally take him down, and one of that team's members, Kitty, is one of the few left at the end. She tries to reason with Wolverine, but when that fails, is forced to face her arm through his head, turning it solid just before Wolverine slices it off. Wolverine is dead, Kitty's without an arm, and likely every reader was either left with a shocked look on their face or tears in their eyes, or both. Number 6. She-Hulk tears Vision in half. This was during one of the times in Marvel history where Scarlet Witch basically went crazy, believing the whole world to be against her and taking it out on them. During the Avenger Disassembled storyline, she was blaming the Avengers for the loss of her children, which she had altered reality to create, as, you know, Vision, her husband, was not actually capable as an artificial life form of fathering children. Wanda decided to attack the Avengers, but indirectly. She appeared to send an altered Vision to do so instead. Her influence also caused She-Hulk to go into an uncontrollable rage. When this happened, She-Hulk saw Vision as the main threat and so ripped him in half. Of course, Vision would later return. This definitely wasn't the end for him, and the two would even reconcile. But just seeing this happen in the pages of a comic was still pretty intense. Anytime someone gets ripped in half, it's pretty intense. Number 5. Hulk gets indigestion. In the alternate timeline that belongs to Old Man Logan, we witness a potential future where Logan lives on land with his wife and 2 children that is owned by the Hulk Gang. The Hulk Gang are multiple generations of Hulk's inbred family. Bruce himself is still alive and demands doubled rent from the Logans. Old Man Logan sets out to collect this rent before the due date when his family is threatened, but unfortunately does not make it back in time, despite him actually arriving early in regards to their originally agreed upon date. Logan finds his family has already been killed in his absence and sets out hell-bent on revenge. Unfortunately, Logan doesn't seem to be much of a match for Hulk, who devours him. Of course, Logan may have actually been counting on that happening. While Hulk's body attempts to digest him, Logan pops his claws and cuts his way out of Hulk's stomach. We have seen Wolverine attempt this move a couple of times in the comics, but it doesn't get any less gruesome anytime he does it, especially with Steve McNiven on pencils. Number 4. Hail Hydra. As much as there was a lot to love about this event, there was also a lot that people were left hating. Captain America ended up being revealed as a longtime Hydra sleeper agent, which was amazing considering how many times he'd publicly fought against Nazis and Hydra, only to be revealed as one of them. This is a big part of Cap's character. Of course, this mentality and plot wouldn't stay permanent. I mean, could you believe if it had? Nope, it was all a dream. Well, not quite a dream, but more an altered reality that happened as a result of some tampering with the Cosmic Cube. However, because it was so against Cap's character, this change created a lot of uproar in the comic community, with people either loving or hating this whole adventure regarding Cap and everyone else that was involved. I think the other thing a lot of people were upset about was the fact that the story felt like it was simply made for shock value, made to shock people into buying comics, because how could Cap be a Hydra agent? What's going on? You just had to find out, which honestly made the whole controversy just a little bit worse. Shock value for comics, I get it, you gotta sell comics, but also, really? Like, that's very shocking for people that are huge fans of Captain America. Number 3. Wolverine kills everyone. Not intentionally though. In this instance, he was tricked. During Mark Millar's Old Man Logan limited series, it was revealed that Mysterio tricked Wolverine into killing nearly everyone in the X-Mansion. The staff, the students, his fellow colleagues, the X-Men. There were even more deaths as the supervillains took over the world, leaving us with the dystopian future that we see in this series, but by far, the thought of Wolverine slicing up everyone that he ever considered to be close enough to consider family, believing they were intruders and that he was protecting his own fellow mutants in doing so, is shocking. Also just him holding Jubilee, I was like, no! Number 2. Black Panther becomes zombie food. In the Marvel Zombies world, Black Panther was one of the sole survivors when the zombies first attacked and turned most of his friends into zombified versions of themselves. One such former friend, Hank Pym, actually just managed to trick T'Challa into coming with him. Or, well, he almost did. He just almost. So close. Either way, Hank managed to incapacitate T'Challa, having already begun to change himself. He used Black Panther, his friend, as a food source, keeping him locked away and alive, sawing off pieces of him and slowly devouring him. Fortunately, Black Panther would escape and even become the leader of a land of survivors, although he would eventually turn into a zombie himself much later on. But that's a story for another time.
And number 1, President JFK. Why, of course, this should be number 1. So in the Days Gone By storyline, the end of Volume 5 of Captain America, he recalls those Winter Soldier years as the dark days, a time where there were no birthdays, just a lot of death and killing. Too much to ever forget, is what he says. Now, amongst those that he took out, it was suggested that he took out the 35th President of the United States, which is a pretty big name to go for. So the Soviets send their top ghost assassin to disrupt global politics. Even in the MCU, this is the same. Even the actor that plays Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, has said in an interview how much Steve can forget Bucky, mentioning that Steve was cool with the fact that Soviets have had his best friend brainwashed and then forced to take out the president. He's like, yeah, it's cool. It wasn't really him. He was just kind of, backseat. He actually returned as a zombie amongst other zombified US presidents, which is just insane, the fact that they do this in comics. Kicking off the list at number 10, Bucky's death. Of course, why not start at the beginning after all? So, near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo in the meantime. The bomb went off, hurling Steve Rogers and Bucky into freezing cold waters. And for Cap, well, he came out of this pretty easy, as we all know. He remained frozen, just hanging out. Bucky, though, good old trusty sidekick Buck, Bucky wasn't so lucky after all. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel, so they scooped him up. Why not? It's like Alaskan crab fishermen, but with, assassins. So they fixed him up a fancy new metal arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into a brutal assassin. He has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter, but he doesn't remember how he knows these things, making him a deadly assassin and a pretty badass villain. Now, this is Steve Rogers' right-hand man. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. And this was also a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014, and we're still watching Bucky try and weave his way through all this drama and past. It's not an easy road for the guy. Poor Buck. It's never been easy for him. You feel bad for him. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does a lot over for us at our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's keep going with this crazy list. Number 9. Red Room training. Natasha Romanova. She was trained in the Red Room since she was young, and amongst one of those leading forces of her training was the Winter Soldier. He's one of the best, so it makes sense that he passes on his skills. So Natasha was part of the Black Widow Ops program, and then he would come in and help her with combat training, while also handling the Wolf Spider Ops program. So they worked together a bit. They were all training under this big, bad roof. They even had a thing for each other briefly until he was deemed unstable and put back under cryostasis. That's gotta suck though, right? Whenever you're not being used, they're like, awesome, go clean that, and then you're frozen again until we need you in 50 years. Number 8, Jasper Sitwell. He posed as a high-ranking SHIELD agent in the MCU when in actuality he was a Hydra infiltrator. Played by Maximiliano Hernandez, Jasper Sitwell was trained at the Hydra Preparatory Academy. And he's been in Marvel movies for a while now, starting with Thor back in 2011 as just a SHIELD agent. So he met his brutal fate in Captain America Winter Soldier when Bucky straight up threw him out of a car. It was so fast, scared the life out of me in the theaters. Now this happens, of course, when SHIELD is compromised and all of the shady agents are called out for double dipping into Hydra. So Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon are driving Jasper Sitwell to base in order to use him as a path through the security, and he's in the middle of explaining how this plan is a horrible idea, and before he can even finish, the Winter Soldier finishes him. Before the Winter Soldier's arm comes out of nowhere and then tosses him out, interrupting him. It's great. Number 7, Stiltman. Stiltman, okay, now he may not be the coolest villain by any means, and this is coming from a guy who basically is a Stiltman himself. I mean, I'm a tall dude, it's tough. You bump your head on stuff a lot, you gotta kind of duck. I have back problems now because I duck too much. That's the life of a Stiltman. It's not easy. Now in Civil War, the villain was killed by the Punisher, but in What If House of M, we see him still hanging out with some other villains, like Shocker and Trapster. And then the Winter Soldier takes him out in one single page. It's so easy to miss. So right now, Stiltman is still kicking around in the main continuity. He was resurrected in 2017. So let's just hope the Winter Soldier is the one to take him out again. I mean, after all, it was done so quick. I mean, probably didn't feel much. I'm sure a good amount of people would miss this while they were reading this What If comic. It happened so fast. That's how precise Bucky is. One shot, and you're done. Number 6, Jack Monroe. He made his debut in Young Men issue 24. Now, Jack had a rough upbringing. His parents weren't the greatest by any means, and he grew up idolizing Captain America and his partner Bucky. Now, this is around 1953, right? He looked up to Bucky so much that he started referring to himself as Bucky And when he attended school, he was taught by William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers, and then he even got some work done on his face to match the look. Talk about a fan. So he ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. Sounds like the dream team, that sounds great. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some good work. The only thing was, a year later, things started to turn, things started to go wrong. Yeah, they started to become paranoid schizophrenics from the serum, so the government had to put them in cryogenic suspension. Now, when they were discovered in the modern age, Jack then would go after Cap, Cap would win, and then put him back in the ice. Jack in the ice, that's some Titanic stuff right there. Eventually, after rehab, Jack was allowed to be free. So then we find at the end of Captain America issue 3, volume 5, we find him at a bar where he's drinking and he doesn't look too good. So as he's leaving this bar, he hears a voice call out to him. And then he's shot and then put in the back of a car. Who did he get shot by? Well, the Winter Soldier himself, the guy he idolized. And if you think that's bad, things only somehow got worse involving Jack Monroe. The whole bomb situation, which I'll get into a little later.
Number 5, Old Man Logan. One of the bleakest series to come out of Marvel. Old Man Logan as a character is from the alternate universe of Earth 807128, an alternate world where supervillains won against all the superheroes. This version of the character was created by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven, and has received 2 of his own series, which started out being written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Andrea Sorrentino. The first run is not just dark in terms of its setting, but the pencils and colors also perfectly match the tone of Old Man Logan, a violent, post-apocalyptic world where Logan finds himself constantly haunted by the ghosts of his past. Dun dun dun. Ghosts.
Number 4, Tony Stark's parents. Civil War is one of my favorite Marvel movies to watch, especially when these guys finally battle it out, because there's years of history behind it. It's not just a random thing that pops up and they're like, hey, let's fight. This is a real conflict. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed again by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie is politics. It's superhero politics, like in the comic, minus, the kids getting blown up at the beginning of the comic. We're gonna leave that part out. But in the film adaptation, Tony sides with the government in the Sokovia Accords. He feels responsible for the deaths, especially one of Charles Spencer at the end of Age of Ultron. And Steve, he just wants to protect Bucky. He knows that he's brainwashed, and freedom throughout the team certainly wouldn't hurt as well. Now eventually, due to Baron Zemo's sneaky little work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and then it's revealed. The true reason behind Zemo's plans with the Winter Soldier was to break apart the Avengers by showing Stark footage of a brainwashed Bucky assassinate Tony's parents. And he did it in order to steal the super soldier serum, so he took out his parents and then made other super soldiers. This should count as like a twofer right here. It's a pretty wild moment. It's super dark, probably the darkest that the MCU is going in terms of like actual death and human conflict. And then the next 10 minutes in that movie were treated to Tony just trying to take out Bucky for what he did, while Steve intervenes trying to keep it cool. And then we all know where that ended up. So yeah, Bucky was kind of the reason for most of the Avengers to break up. Should be number 1, there we go. Number 3, Mother Night. Susan Scarborough made her comic book debut in Captain America issue 123. So Susan and her brother were stage hypnotists who turned to crime, which I feel like more supervillains should definitely do. Hey, if you can do magic or anything like that, for sure be a villain. If you can make something disappear, you've done it. You're now a villain. Congratulations. So yeah, they used hypnotism to put together an army. I already love these guys, awesome. So she would take over gangs with hypnotism, which sounds like the funniest thing ever. And of course, at one point she tried to turn over S.H.I.E.L.D. and take control. But luckily Captain America wasn't gonna let her little magic hypnotist trick work, no. So soon she became known as Mother Night, which sounds cooler, definitely. And she started working her way up and got close to the Red Skull. She liked him. He didn't like her, not like that, There was no hypnotism that was turning his heart this time. Then in part 3 of Captain America Out of Time, Union Jack finds the Red Skull men in the London Underground not alive, and one of those bodies amongst them was Mother Night. It was of course revealed that this was the doings of the Winter Soldier after the fact, and in order to show how dangerous this villain was, he needed to take out this hypnotist villain that has been around for 30 years. 30 years, and then it's like, hey, Bucky took him out. I lied. Number 2, Neil Tapper. This all goes down in issue 6 of Captain America, or part 6 of the Out of Time storyline. So Neil Tapper, right, he was an agent at S.H.I.E.L.D. who had a fling going on with Sharon Carter. Then they split up and Sharon went missing in Philadelphia during a mission to find Jack Monroe. Yeah, this is the same Jack Monroe that I said up there. It's got a lot of layers to it. So Neil Tapper and Nick Fury weren't getting along at this point. Neil thought that Nick wasn't doing a good job with handling Carter's disappearance, and then Fury, being Fury, gave him a stern talk, and then he joined in on the search in Philadelphia. So Sharon was found by Cap. She was with a group of bad guys, which there was also a bomb involved there. So Neil tried to deactivate the bomb, but it went off anyways. This whole bomb, this Bucky bomb thing, it's like no matter where you go, this guy's gonna be the cause of your death.
Number 1, Pop goes Doctor Strange, or his head. Ew. For this gory moment, we head to Ultimatum. I know, I'm sorry, but sometimes we gotta go back there. Now in Ultimatum, Doctor Strange took on an enemy that we've seen him battle multiple times before in the comics, Dormammu, and usually win against Dormammu even, but not this time. This time it was Dormammu who reigned victorious after using Doctor Strange's cape to strangle him to death by wrapping tightly around him. So tight in fact that Strange's head exploded. There are a lot of cons for wearing capes in a fight in terms of practicality, I know this, but this has got to be one of the most horrific instances of one that I've ever seen in the comics.
And at 10, Psylocke. During the follow-up to the original Contest of Champions story, a seemingly peaceful group of aliens invited the heroes to battle each other and showcase their abilities, with the reward being new tech for all of Earth. In reality though, this was the plan all by the Brood to drain the powers of Earth's greatest champions and then pump them into Rogue, who at the time was carrying the Brood's queen's consciousness. In this competition though, Iron Man was put up against Psylocke. Luckily, Iron Man had built some dampeners into his suit in an effort to limit psychic attacks. However, Psylocke was still able to create the illusion that she was Lady Mandarin once more, and she got the upper hand on Tony for a hot minute before eating it and then getting destroyed by the gold titanium alloy man. And at 9, Falcon. Falcon is an excellent flyer, and in Captain America's third MCU title movie, he is shown as quite the pro pilot, dodging and being able to keep pace with both Iron Man and War Machine, even breaking away a few times, once with the aid of Hawkeye and Ant-Man. However, when the chips are down and we're on the ground, Iron Man certainly has the upper hand, as he demonstrated in the brief moments when Falcon dodged Vision's beam and caused it to hit Rhodey's arc reactor, causing him to plummet hundreds of feet and screw up his legs. And you know, since they're still the good guys, Falcon goes up to check on Rhodey and see if he's okay, but Tony blasts him and knocks him to the ground with one single blast. I have to be honest, it counts, but it's still funny as hell. I love that scene. And at 8, Brother Voodoo. Jericho returned to his native Port-au-Prince, Haiti after 12 years of education and practice in the United States. His brother Daniel though was dying from the spell of a rival Bokor who claimed he served the evil serpent god Damballa. After only a few weeks, Jericho had reached a proficiency in voodoo even greater than his brothers though. To further increase his power, Papa Jambo performed a rite that summoned Daniel Drum's spirit back from the dead and joined it with Jericho's own. And in the Axis storyline, Brother Voodoo used this power to possess Scarlet Witch, who Iron Man then had to fight off. Brother Voodoo, possessing Wanda along with a good Doctor Doom and Red Skull, worked to reverse the spell that caused Axis, but Iron Man escaped its effects by throwing up a last-minute telepathic shield, protecting himself from its reversal. I think that it's weird, like having a good version of Doctor Doom, though. I mean, Doom is literally in his name, but okay. Iron Man still technically won then. Just saying.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Steel Corpse. Hailing from Earth 11326, this version of Iron Man was pretty similar to our own, but with two key differences. He's permanently fused with his suit, and he absolutely hates mutants. Fighting alongside other Villainous Avengers to wipe out this universe's X-Men, this Iron Man's natural body died long ago after being melded with his machinery, and thus he jokingly calls himself the Steel Corpse as a way of coping with his morbid situation. This version of Iron Man had complete mastery of his weaponry, as they were literally a part of his body, and only a last-second change of heart before sacrificing himself stops this Tony Stark from being one of the absolute worst.
And at 6, Iron Man. In the Avengers crossover known as The Crossing, Iron Man beat himself. Yeah, that's not even the crazy part though. The big hook in this storyline is that many years ago, Kang came back in time and basically brainwashed Tony Stark in the early days of the Avengers. You might ask, what? And then you might ask again, seriously, bro, are you serious? And then another question of, if Tony Stark had been under Kang's control for all these years, why didn't Kang use Tony to help him any of the times that the Avengers actually had beaten Kang? And the answer to that is, of course, we have no f***ing idea. And then there was another bad idea that was thrown into the mix. The notion that Kang only turned to Tony after Hank Pym didn't actually fall for his mental tricks, which is why Hank has mental problems. Yeah, until one faithful team member had the genius idea to go back in time to get Tony Stark before Kang had brainwashed him, and then have that Tony fight against the older Tony. Tony actually ends up nearly killing his younger self, but hey, Iron Man won against Iron Man. Even if it was inevitable that an Iron Man would win, it's good enough for this list, damn it.
At number 5, we've got the time Iron Man shields up right as the Hulk is about to hit him with a huge missile. It seems that at this point in the storyline, the Hulk feels that he's been betrayed by Iron Man, so he's very angry, as usual, and decides to abandon reason and use force instead, as usual. What's brutal about this event isn't just that the Hulk is basically one-shotted by the explosion, but also that Iron Man first rubs it in by schooling the Hulk on the make and design of the missile. He identifies it as his own technology and notices leakage that threatens an explosion that would send them both to Mars and back. So he activates a super powerful shield which protects him from the blast. And those visuals are just ridiculous, seeing the Hulk getting vaporized by the explosion as Iron Man's safe and sound in his little bubble. Not what the Hulk was expecting. Maybe it's time for that dude to start thinking before he acts, especially when he's in the presence of one of the best.
And at 4, the Winter Soldier. Tony isn't able to get the upper hand on the Winter Soldier until he's sufficiently filled with rage of personal loss. And I mean, aren't we all? Rage is the fuel that makes the world go round. Which we actually see play out in the same movie as the fight with Falcon. After Tony learned that Bucky was actually the one responsible for his parents' car crash. I mean, I can see both sides of the coin here. Like, yeah, Bucky at the time was being controlled by Hydra, so it wasn't really him who did it, just his meat suit. But on the other hand, I wouldn't care. He killed my mommy. So yeah, I get why he went nuts. And I always find it funny that somehow Bucky always seems to end up losing his arm, at least his metal one, in some way or another. To be fair though, I don't think Tony would have blown off his arm if it wasn't metal. But like, imagine Bucky was faking having the whole metal arm thing the whole time. And it was just like a cool sleeve that he had that was hiding his real arm, and then Tony blew it off. It was like, ah! That'd be funny. I want to see that what if story. I know it would be absolutely horrific animation wise, but come on, please make it happen. Also, I'm pretty sure that they had the Disney Plus series for What If planned before Stan Lee's passing, and that they were going to reveal him as the Watcher, but couldn't, which is sad. I wish that had happened.
Coming in at number 3, we have Obadiah Stane, aka the Ironmonger in the very first Iron Man film. It's become a bit of a meme at this point that many of the supervillains of the MCU are dark reflections of the same powers and personalities as the heroes they're opposing, and the Ironmonger is the origin of that trope in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Completely guilt-free about selling weapons to all sides, Stane is a ruthless businessman willing to do anything to maintain control of Stark Industries, and shows just how awful Tony's new technology could be used in the wrong hands, and what a monster he could become if he gave up on his deepest morals. Although, honestly, the fact that his idea of upgrading the Iron Man suit is just to make the original one bigger, maybe he's not quite as smart as Tony after all.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Hulk. Thanks to the versatility of Tony's suits and some help from Bruce Banner himself, Iron Man was able to take on the Hulk when Scarlet Witch sent him rampaging across South Africa in Avengers Age of Ultron, calling down Veronica, which I feel like should be a reference to the Archie comics, but I could be very wrong. The suit proved to be everything we could have hoped for as it went shot for shot with Hulk. The best scene from this fight though is when he grabs Hulk's hand and then traps it and then just jackhammers the other fist into Hulk's face. Oh, I love that. However, this isn't the only time they fought. They also fought in Iron Man number 132 in 1980, when Hulk punched Tony into a semi-truck, tried ripping his suit open underwater while Iron Man was trying to drown him, which I feel like might have been a bit extreme there, Tony. And even ripped off a chunk of the St. Louis Arch to use as a projectile. In the end though, it took Tony loading an insane amount of energy into his armor to deliver the final blow, taking the big green meanie down. After that though, Hulk turned into Banner and then Tony's suit busted, literally falling to the ground around him. Finally, in at number 1, Sentry. Iron Man's fight with Sentry from Siege number 4 in 2010 is one of those he was being controlled by an evil thing tropes, where technically Sentry was the Void at the time, and the Void may technically be a separate entity of purely negative energy, but it often manifests inside Sentry's body and in essence has the same abilities, so it's like Tony beat Sentry. This isn't a list of heroes that Tony fought while they were on the good side, okay? It's a list of the most powerful heroes that Tony has beat, even if they weren't heroes at the time. It's good enough. During the events of Siege, Void served Norman Osborn as part of his Dark Avengers, raining destruction down on Earth and Asgard, which is definitely an issue for the world because, you know, Earth. While Thor may have been the one to deal the killing blow, though Tony was the one who had weakened Void into a state where he could be killed. So good on you, Tony. You took down basically a god and lived. Pretty impressive if you ask me. Especially because, like, didn't Sentry like tear Ares in half or something nuts like that? I remember talking about that. I feel like that was Sentry. I think Sentry tore the Marvel version of Ares in half. Or was that another person? I can't remember.
At number 10, it is the time when Iron Man almost kills a non-Cyttorak powered Juggernaut. In this exchange, Juggernaut is on a tear, and Thor, Ghost, Luke Cage, and Iron Man appear to try and put a stop to him. Iron Man warns Juggernaut with total confidence to stand down because the numbers are against him. Juggernaut then basically hits L2 and activates his taunt, saying, "Then it's almost even." Should not have said that. So instead of humoring any more of this back and forth, Iron Man promptly follows through with his threat and blasts Juggernaut, almost killing him. The blast he hits him with is a sonic beam that he's used before to put down a whole regiment. The attack injures Juggernaut so badly that he's basically like steaming and bleeding from every orifice on his face. It's so bad that Luke Cage has to stop Iron Man before he kills the Juggernaut there and then. And it's pretty clear that Juggernaut had no idea that Iron Man would dominate the battle this much. And it becomes one of the many moments where Iron Man is able to come through and show everyone that he's not only one of the most powerful in the room, but that he's also willing to follow through. Okay, at number 9, we have the time when Iron Man is called to free hostages from an enclosure made of adamantium and vibranium, two of the strongest materials in the known universe. Remember, adamantium is the metal that reinforces Wolverine's skeleton and what his claws are made of, and vibranium is what Black Panther's weapons are made of, which can absorb and amplify sonic energy. So when Cardiac traps his hostages in a massive enclosure made of these materials, he clearly doesn't believe that there's any chance anyone could thwart his plans. But when Iron Man arrives on scene, he promptly backs himself up and basically turns his body into a human missile, rocketing towards the enclosure and busting a huge hole in it with his fist. This allows oxygen to enter the chamber, giving the team much more time to eventually save the hostages entirely. He does break his arm and a few ribs, but once again, he takes a villain's confidence and absolutely shatters it with his supreme power and iron will. At number 8, we have an event that is counted widely as one of Iron Man's most powerful feats. Mandarin and Iron Man find themselves facing off against a common enemy, an army of dragons led by Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su. And the dragons seem to be winning. After some pretty close calls, Iron Man and Mandarin seem to be at a stalemate, realizing that the dragons are just not letting up. At this very moment, Chen Su morphs back into dragon form and makes a final appeal to Mandarin for the rings, citing their power and how he is ill-equipped to control them himself. Iron Man realizes that this may be true, but that he is much more than a man, so he could himself unleash the true power of the rings, and he does. He grabs Mandarin's hands and unleashes an enormous explosion that levels a few mountain ranges as well as Fin Fang Foom and Chen Su in one go. This is another moment where a major enemy underestimates Iron Man's superhuman abilities and pays the price for it.
And at 7, Magneto. Yes, at the time of the battle of Iron Man and Magneto, Magneto was on the up and up, and as far as I'm aware, currently is. During Avengers vs. X-Men number 2 from 2012, the Avengers engaged the X-Men on their island home Utopia to get their hands on Hope and stop the coming threat of the Phoenix. This issue, among other interwoven ones, showed various Avengers facing off against mutants like Cyclops and Emma Frost, and Magneto and Iron Man going toe-to-toe. Which seems to be absolutely easy cheese given Magneto's control over metal, but Tony knew about this and had a suit composed of carbon fiber tubes, as well as studying magnetism in his free time, because why not? So in a moment of distraction when Magneto realized what the Phoenix would actually bring power-wise, Tony managed to land a final blow and knock him from the sky. I mean, sure, Magneto had a moment of distraction that allowed Tony to win, but half of the fight is staying mentally in the fight. You fight with your skill and your mind, and Magneto dropped it.
At number 6 is the time when Iron Man unhinges a plan set by the Raxon Corporation when they detonate a deposit of vibranium to try and destroy a fleet of battleships. Basically, going back, it starts with a battle between Iron Man and Namor, which is interrupted by the realization that Raxon is trying to gain control of a whole island due to a deposit of the highly valuable metal vibranium mentioned earlier. When a group of battleships close in to prevent this from taking place, the corrupt corporation decides to detonate the vibranium so that no one can have it. And it seems to be part of the plan to destroy these battleships in the process. But what does Iron Man do? He decides he wants to control the narrative and physically tows the 5 battleships away from the explosion. This makes it so Raxxon just destroys the vibranium for no reason. And Iron Man does this with one of his old armors too. He can't help but show everyone that he has the strength to change everyone's plan at any given time and leave them in the dust wondering what happened.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Iron Maniac. On the dark alternate world of Earth 5012, most of the superheroes of this reality are dead after an unknown fatal error made by Reed Richards. A vengeful and violent Tony Stark makes it his life's mission to get revenge on Reed and modifies his armor to resemble that of Reed's worst enemy, Doctor Doom. This insane version of Iron Man killed the Human Torch and was eventually banished to the main Marvel universe, where he had to be subdued by the combined efforts of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Black Widow, who found it a bit unnerving to be fighting such a far-gone version of one of their closest allies. This Tony was just as resourceful as the real one, however, as he'd even escape custody by building a new suit from the remains of a life model decoy. Pretty resourceful for an insane Iron Man.
Okay, at number 4 is the time when Iron Man fractures the Phoenix Force with his Phoenix Buster armor. Now, I'm not sure if the Phoenix Force can physically feel anything, let alone embarrassment, considering it's a cosmic entity powerful enough to shatter whole worlds like glass, but if it could, its face would be red and hot after Iron Man absolutely wrecks Phoenix Force, forcing it to split up into 5 pieces. And the Phoenix Force isn't the only one who should be feeling the burn from this huge win by Iron Man. Thor even fails to take down Phoenix Force with his hammer right before Tony succeeds at it. So Iron Man is just showing everyone up in this event. And this is a huge event that had been building up for a while. Phoenix Force had been posing a huge threat to the X-Men and the Avengers in this storyline. So Iron Man just showing up and blowing it up into a bunch of pieces is pretty humiliating for such a powerful being. I just like to picture Phoenix Force getting all geared up about taking out all these superheroes and then their plans having to change entirely after a little human in his own little armor appears to stop them in their tracks. It's just, yikes, wrecked.
Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Spider-Man. Iron Man and Spider-Man have fought almost as much as they've teamed up, with Civil War being one of the multiple times they did both. While Peter and Tony's connection during the 2005 run of New Avengers initially saw Spidey joining Team Iron Man in the conflict, which actually ended up resulting in Peter unmasking himself on live television, then coming to regret it and having some horrible future comic storylines. The wall crawler changes his tune once he learns about Tony's secret prison in the negative zone. The moral implications of which makes Peter switch sides, because you know he was imprisoning heroes who disagree with superhero registration in a different freaking yeah. Peter wins the first round despite Tony threatening to kill Aunt May and Mary Jane, but when the two meet at Yankee Stadium later on, Spider-Man gets absolutely pummeled. But don't worry, Spider-Man gives as good as he gets in other issues. Go watch the top 10 most powerful superheroes who lost to Spider-Man if you want more info on that. That's right, I'm telling you to go watch another video. But after this one, of course, you're only 2 numbers away. You only got 2 more to go. Stay.
Okay, nearing the top of our list at number 2, we have the iconic face-off between Iron Man and Captain America. During the Civil War conflict, the Avengers are split into 2 different factions, one side being led by Captain America, the other by Iron Man. And as tensions escalate on either side, it finally culminates to a big battle between the 2 sides, and of course between Iron Man and Captain America themselves. But like everyone else on this list, Captain America somehow underestimates Tony Stark when he tries to pull a fast one on him and disable his armor. After what seems like a conciliatory handshake between Iron Man and Captain America, Tony notices a small electron scrambler device on his hand, leaving him open to a blow by Cap's shield right to the face. But as Iron Man is laying on the ground, petrified, he simply reboots his armor and gets back up. I don't think Captain America expects this either, because Iron Man flies at him and after an effortless fist fight, knocks him to the ground, almost severing his jaw with one massive punch in the face. This is high up on the list because Captain America is a very skilled strategist, and watching him get shown up so hard like this has to be pretty humiliating, especially in front of all his peers like that. Oof. At number 1, it is the face-off that Iron Man has against Magneto during the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. This event takes the top of the list because of the irony. Get it? The irony of this particular face-off, given that Magneto manipulates metal and Iron Man is made of it. Fans had been anticipating this face-off for some time, so when it came, everyone expected Magneto to take the W. And that includes Magneto himself. But in classic ingenious Iron Man fashion, Tony Stark shows up to the fight with a special non-metal armor made out of nanotubes, stealing this huge advantage from Magneto. But that's not where it ends. Iron Man then harnesses the power of Jupiter's magnetic field to power up his armor and take down the magnetic supervillain. And while Magneto is coming back for one final attempt, he's distracted by Phoenix Force, giving Iron Man the chance to knock him out properly this time. This is a huge embarrassment for Magneto since he's the obvious choice for this battle. It might take some time to recover from that one, and I'm not just talking about his physical wounds.
Number 10. Marvel. When Captain Marvel came out, there was a lot of backlash surrounding the film for many reasons, but I'm not here to talk about the SJW stuff. I am here to talk about some changes made to one specific character, Mar-Vell. In the story, the character of Mar-Vell was gender swapped and played by Annette Bening, who I personally thought did a great job as the Kree scientist slash superhero. But why did we gender swap the role? I'm a big fan of gender swaps when they are done well and they mean something, but many people were left to ask why this has been swapped. It didn't seem to inform any relevant changes to the character. Was it because they simply preferred Bening for that role? Or was it to convey an air of mystery in regards to who Mar-Vell was in the story? And if it's the latter, making a great change to the character's alias should have also then happened. As much as I like the idea of the change being plot driven, they then made her alias Wendy Lawson. An obvious parallel for comic fans to the comic book Mar-Vell's Walter Lawson. So yeah, this gender swap didn't really feel relevant and as such left people asking unsatisfied, but why though? Number 9. Cyclops eliminates Professor X. There was a time when Professor X was seen as a full-fledged hero, a brilliant man with a desire only to see and create harmony and equality in the world. Isn't that nice? Since his introduction, however, more and more seeds of doubt kept cropping up when it came to his methods in terms of training his X-Men and attempting to achieve his lofty goals. By the time the Phoenix Five had come about, many mutants and readers were divided on just how heroic and good Professor X really was. Still, when Cyclops, in a Phoenix-induced rage, was approached by Xavier, who tried to reason with Scott and calm him down as his sort of father figure and mentor, we all suspected Scott would listen. Instead, Scott completely obliterated Professor Xavier, and regardless of your mixed feelings about Professor X, the scene was pretty tragic. Even Scott admitted, despite being under the influence of the Phoenix Force, that he had done wrong, and even agreed that he should atone for the murder. Granted, this wasn't the first time Professor X had died, but it was one of his darkest deaths, being killed by one of his most prized students. Number 8. Deadpool kills his parents. Wade Wilson, being an insane mercenary and former assassin, is of course one of the darker characters Marvel has to offer. And yet even Deadpool for the most part manages to keep things pretty humorous and light. This is a dude who refers to all vampires as Draculas. This is a hero who is so insane it's basically humorous and who uses jokes to likely mask his own pain. But despite being a regular comedian, Deadpool has gone through some pretty dark and crazy times and done and seen some pretty crazy stuff. One such dark adventure of his was during the time he was brainwashed by Butler into killing his parents. Deadpool of course did not know who they were. He appears to recognize items in the house like an old baseball glove that perhaps once belonged to him in another life, but a job's a job, he reasons. He dismisses his gut instinct and burns the house to the ground while his parents are asleep upstairs, completely unaware of course that they are his parents. Even Sabretooth feels bad about this incident. Number 7. Really close brother-sister relationship. Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver have always been close in the comics, but one series in alternate reality took their relationship a little too far. The Wanda Maximoff of Earth 1610, the Ultimates reality, has an even closer relationship, and creepier one, with her brother it seems. In Ultimates 3, writer Jeff Loeb decided to confirm that their flirtations were, well, more than that, and that brother and sister were actually in a romantic and very physical relationship with one another. Even more dark and disturbing, Pietro also compliments his sister on how she looks more and more like their mother every day before getting it on with her. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase keeping it in the family. Ick. Number 6. Death of Daken. Last issues of comic series often tend to be the most epic, and for 2010's Uncanny X-Force, that expectation held true. Although the climax of the story ended up being a lot more tragic and dark than happy and celebratory. Daken ends up being manipulated by Sabretooth, who proves here how much of a master strategist he can be when it leads to Wolverine being forced to take out Daken, drowning him in a puddle. Wolverine holds back during the beginning of the fight, feeling the weight of what he knows he must do, and when he does end up striking out full force, it's Daken's dreams and thoughts we see in between panels of his father drowning him. Daken imagines what life being raised by Logan, being a family unit, would be like. It's heart-wrenching. And afterwards, Sabretooth is there to gloat and reveal that Wolverine killing Daken was all because of his machinations. Just another way, maybe one of the worst ways, that Sabretooth has wounded Logan over the years. Such a well-written, such a sad story, ugh.
Number 5. Itsu Akihiro. So last video I did was on the many romances of Wolverine, and most of the ladies in Logan's life end up meeting a dark and cruel fate, like Itsu Akihiro, the woman Logan met while he was in Japan after World War II. She was living in Jasmine Falls and met Logan during his 4th year of training with Bando Saburo, who at the time was teaching him how to be a man and leave the warrior nature in his past. Now the two had fallen in love at this point, and shortly after she was expecting a baby. So one day Logan was proving himself worthy of being a man, and more importantly as a father, during a combat exercise. And then an explosion caught him off guard and one of his claws popped out and he accidentally stabbed a villager. And then he was banned from the village. So then he went to go say goodbye to Itsu in their home and he found her dead. Now who's to blame here but again the Winter Soldier. Yep, he was acting under Romulus's order in order to get Logan out of hiding and back to Madripoor. And let's just say, the plan kinda worked.
Number 4. Zombieverse. Another alternate world, and in this case slew of series, that managed to be even darker than Old Man Logan belong to the place we refer to as the Zombieverse, or the alternate Earth of 2149. Here all of your favorite heroes have died or been replaced by zombies, or likely a little bit of both. This reality is where we saw Spider-Man eat Aunt May and MJ, unable to stop himself from killing them. We also see She-Hulk eat Valerian, Franklin Richards, the children of her teammates and friends from the Fantastic Four. It's also the alternate world where Hank Pym's Ant-Man keeps Black Panther alive so he can slowly saw off pieces of him and eat them while they're fresh to satiate his hunger. Ugh, the Zombieverse it's really something else. I have to go there so often and I'm just like, man, sometimes I wish I could just not go there. Number 3. Hydra Cap. Captain America is known for being one of the most good, most noble characters that Marvel has. He's kind of like Marvel's Superman when it comes to ideals. He stands for liberty, freedom, and justice. He's got a bit of a classic honesty to him as well, being a hero sort of launched out of time or displaced out of time. So it shocked everyone when it was revealed that he was a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra, dun dun dun, and had been playing us this whole time. Of course, he hadn't. Well, he had, but it wasn't necessarily by choice. Reality had been altered when an organic, child-appearing version of the Cosmic Cube, known as Kobek, was influenced by Red Skull, and then attempted to revive a dying Steve Rogers, turning him into, you know, the Steve Rogers that we had when he was part of Hydra. Alternate Steve Rogers. Number 2. We're in the endgame now. When Thanos was revealed to be the biggest bad that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had yet to face, the supervillain who'd been plotting in the background of the film since almost the beginning, we were all pretty confident that all of our heroes united could take him down, right? If not, we were waiting for the teased-at Adam Warlock to appear out of the sky and Deus Ex Machina us out of this mess. But in the Avengers film Infinity War, that is not what happened. Instead, Thanos showed up and with the help of his goon squad, the Black Order, ended up managing to defeat Earth's mightiest heroes and get his hands on the Infinity Stones. Thor arrived just in time to stop him, but keeping things PG with his aim and targeting Thanos' chest instead of his head, well, that would come back to haunt him. Thanos managed to also defeat Thor and snap 50% of the universe out of existence, giving us some of the darkest times our heroes had seen yet, and some of the saddest death scenes in the MCU when we lost teenage Groot and Peter Parker. Sad. Number 10. Hawkeye kills Black Widow. We tend to talk a lot on Top 10 Nerd about one of the darkest areas of Marvel's comic lines and alternate worlds, the Ultimates, the Earth of 1610. In this reality, Black Widow becomes a villain after betraying Tony Stark. While her betrayal of Iron Man and her fellow teammates is a dark enough story, we're going to talk about what happens after the betrayal that we all tend to focus on more. Hawkeye ends up being betrayed by Natasha as well. His entire family is slaughtered because of her, and he is taken in, questioned, and tortured. Brutally tortured. Because in the Ultimates reality, he actually has a family, similar to the one that you actually see in the MCU. Clint impressively escapes his captors using only his detached fingernails as weaponized projectiles to take them out. He then hunts down Natasha, who was incapacitated by Tony and is in the hospital. Hawkeye kills her with an arrow to the head, but only after he pins her hands to the walls with arrows. Youch. The whole thing is pretty dark. Number 9. Strange Academy. Strange Academy's first issue was just recently released early March 2020, but when the comic was first announced, it was met with lots of mixed feelings from Marvel fans, and fans of another popular franchise. See if you can guess which one. The idea around Strange Academy was to spin a yarn about a school of uniquely magically gifted youngsters who join an academy in New Orleans to hone their powers. Sounding familiar yet? Many took to Twitter to share their outrage for what was deemed a potential ripoff of many other magically based series and fandoms involving academies. Yep, one of them being, you guessed it, the magical world of Harry Potter. Of course, the first issue is out now, so this is one people can now read up on and decide for themselves if this backlash was warranted or not. Number 8. First openly gay character. In the MCU, that is. When it was rumored that the first openly gay character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would finally appear after more than 20 films, people were of course excited and eager to find out who the character was and to learn more about them and their story. All the excitement unfortunately only led to disappointment and outrage from fans when we found out that the character, played by Joe Russo himself, was only in 10 seconds of the 3-hour film. 10 seconds, that's all we got. The character was simply an unnamed civilian who is part of a support group led by Steve Rogers himself, seeking to help those who lost loved ones during the snap. What do we discover about him? Well, we discovered that he simply lost his partner and is trying to get back into dating again. He had no importance in regards to the main narrative, and while the filmmakers had good intentions when it came to including an openly gay character, his lack of substance or importance made people feel like Marvel was merely pandering. People had been looking for more meaningful representation. Though Kevin Feige and the Marvel and Disney team responded to the backlash, assuring fans that more genuine overall diversity in the world of supers could be expected in the next phase. Number 7. Quicksilver dies. Quicksilver is known for being one of the fastest, if not the fastest person in the Marvel Universe. His need for speed has saved the Marvel Universe more than once, and he's a popular and well-known character and stable among the superhero community. And yet, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was reduced to death by bullet. Yep. A guy who in the world of Fox Marvel X-Men can apparently move fast enough to save the entire occupants of the X-Mansion, Fish included, from an explosion as it is in the midst of happening. Really? Really, Disney and Marvel? Really, you gonna do them like that? Number 6. Iceman comes out. Okay, so you know me, I'm all for having gay characters and supers in the Marvelverse. I'm even for retconning some characters' sexual orientations to provide a more diverse cast when it comes to some of our original super teams' makeup. Because, you know, they were all really straight at the beginning there, because it was the 50s and the 60s. But this retcon got a lot of backlash for a reason that I would say is pretty understandable. Not what was being done, but really more how it was done. A common complaint among Marvel fans when it comes to decisions and retcons that are made for our most beloved characters. The fact that a younger Bobby Drake and a younger Jean Grey from the past had to convince him of his sexuality was weird. Like, why did he have to realize that he'd been gay all along? Why couldn't this have just been a thing that he realized in the present by himself? It just felt very put upon as opposed to being natural and organic. Many people rediscover their sexual orientation and sexuality every day. It isn't like you have to always know from the beginning. It can be more fluid than that. And the way this was written in and then later kind of dropped again made the whole thing feel kind of, well, forced, and like they were using it. Like I said, I like that they made this choice, but like many, I wish that they'd executed the moment of revelation with a bit more grace, and not by saying that if you aren't in love with Jean Grey, you must be gay. Not everyone has to be in love with Jean Grey, guys, okay? Just because you're an X-Men You don't have to be in love with Jean Grey. Stop it. It's weird. Number 5. Apolitical politics. Art Spiegelman is known as one of the most acclaimed comic writers. He even won a Pulitzer Prize for his graphic novel Mouse. When asked to write an introductory essay for a collection of Marvel works, a phrase referring to Donald Trump as an orange skull was highlighted by the editing team, who said that due to Marvel's editorial policy, it would have to be omitted in order for the introductory essay to make it to print in regards to the collection. Spiegelman was slightly surprised and ended up rescinding his essay as a result. This news led to much backlash from both the Marvel and general comic book fan community alike, who criticized Marvel for making political statements only when it was safe or could be used to make them more money, and hiding behind an apolitical policy when they were too afraid to make statements. Let's not forget that Marvel themselves created a villainous version of Trump in 2016's Spider-Gwen annual, known as MODAK, and yet they can't have that phrase in an essay. I mean, what are you doing, Marvel? Which one are we doing here? Number 4. Nova brutally disembowels Annihilus. This has got to be one of the most violent kills we've seen in the pages of a Marvel comic. During Annihilation in issue 6, we saw Nova, aka Richard Rider, take on Annihilus and succeed in defeating him. But he didn't just defeat him, he disemboweled him. And not in a conventional way either, but by reaching down his throat. That's right, the brutal and violent end happened by Nova punching down into Annihilus' throat, so far in fact that he somehow reached his organs. I don't know how that scientifically works, but there you go. And he pulled specifically what appeared to be his intestines out through his mouth. Quite intense. I don't think you can actually do that to someone, but I'm not gonna ask if it's possible because I don't want to know. Number 3. Fake mutants. That moment when Marvel retconned the origins of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, declaring that they were no longer, nor had they ever truly been, mutants. Excuse me? In Uncanny Avengers Volume 2 Issue 4, it was confirmed that these two were not mutants, but had been disguised as mutants by the High Evolutionary, who had experimented on them, got bored, and disguised them as mutants, just for funsies. But this whole retcon really started during the Axis event. During Axis, Wanda basically found out through a magical blood test, as the results came flooding in, that Magneto was not her father. Although Quicksilver was confirmed as her biological brother, which, given everything that was implied between the two in the Ultimate Universe, and their intense love for one another even in the main continuity, would have actually been something that I think we'd prefer retconned out of existence. Please, tell us they aren't related. The retcon of Pietro and Wanda Maximoff not being related to Magneto or being considered mutants was something that made years of family drama and much of House of M feel irrelevant, which I think is why people kind of felt, betrayed by this. Number 2. Avengers vs. Martin Scorsese. This backlash from Marvel fans was not directed at Marvel itself, but instead at Martin Scorsese, who remarked that MCU films were more about entertainment than the art of cinema. Fans not only revolted against the famed director, but also revolted against those who sided with him, which oddly enough included 2015's Fantastic Four film director and writer Josh Trank. Although he deleted the tweet after, he originally posted on Twitter his opinion of a genre of films that he actually was oddly enough a part of, despite the fact that FF was not really part of the MCU, saying, "Watching The Irishman, the first 5 minutes have more humanity and truth and cinematic intrigue than the running length of every single Marvel movie combined. Ah, sorry, facts. P.S. not sorry." Wow, hashtag troll life. Number 1. Snowflake and the New Warriors. I mean, you knew we were going to talk about this, right? The New Warriors was always meant to be a team about radicalizing the world of heroes. They were meant to be edgy and relatable to the youth of today. But this version of the New Warriors takes that commitment a little too far, and while trying to make themselves more relatable, only seems to end up inevitably distancing the very people they want to attract. The backlash surrounding the New Warriors is not about what they're trying to do, but like with most things, the lack of tact they seem to be able to exhibit while reinventing this squad of supers. It's almost like the squad was made without anyone actually reaching out and conversing with the groups that they're meant to represent. Oh, wait. The most problematic of the new heroes appears to be Snowflake and Safe Space. Snowflake is the first Marvel superhero to be explicitly labeled as non-binary. Cool, but why are we calling them Snowflake? Add in the fact that Safe Space, another term that is often made fun of online and often thrown around in a condescending way in regards to the LGBTQ community, is the name of Snowflake's twin, and that the two are described as a binary pair. And you already have more cringe to add to an already pretty cringy problem. Especially when you look at how the two are often drawn together, how they hold one another. Anyone else getting some Icky Maximov twincest vibes here? No, just me? Ooh. Number 10. Zombie Hulk kills Zombie Iron Man. During the events of Marvel Zombies, pretty much almost all of the zombified heroes meet their end at one point or another, save for a lucky, or I guess unlucky, few. Iron Man is not one of the zombified heroes who makes it, however. He is one of the victims of Zombie Hulk, who kills a bunch of other zombies when they start getting angry with him for eating so much, as they fear their food supply of brains and meat is running low. Zombie Hulk crushes Zombie Iron Man to the point that blood sprays out of his mouth and eye holes of his armor. Basically, he squishes him like a grape.
Number 9. Ant-Man. During Marvel's Secret Empire event, you know, the one where Captain America revealed himself to be the supreme leader of Hydra, Ant-Man, like many of the other heroes, naturally sided with the hero side of things and was a dedicated member of the Underground. That is, until his daughter Cassie was abducted by Hydra and he was forced to not only comply with their every demand, but also report to them all the plans of the Underground Resistance. While many of the plans he relayed weren't too major, he was forced to tell Hydra when the heroes managed to find 2 fragments of the Cosmic Cube, and that resulted in Hydra showing up at the Underground's doorstep. I will say though, to his merit, he did confess that he was involved with Hydra and tried to make amends for doing wrong by the team. And he also played a huge role in restoring Steve Rogers when the Cosmic Cube reformed. Now, if you've got the time, this storyline definitely deserves a read, starting with 2017's Secret Empire Volume 1, Number 0.
Number 8. Iron Man almost kills Tony Stark. Iron Man is really good at making suits, sometimes too good. At one point, he decided to make an AI suit instead of an AI to be used in his suit. This artificially intelligent suit did what most artificial robotic intelligences do. It almost immediately became evil. Although Tony did also decide to use some Ultron code to construct it, which honestly probably was not such a good idea, especially for someone who's supposed to be a computer genius. In the end, the suit created programming that allowed it to feel emotions, and after fighting with Tony Stark and trying to get him to forcibly merge with itself, it eventually felt remorse at its action. While during their fight, Stark suffered a heart attack. The suit sacrificed its own life, giving Stark an emergency and what looks like terrifying artificial heart transplant. Like, you can still see the artificial heart sticking out of Tony's chest. That does not look sanitary to me. Number 7. Tony Stark sacrifices Tony Stark. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was Tony himself who killed Tony, or while he chose to sacrifice himself in order to ensure the events of Thanos' snap at the end of Infinity War, which initially wiped out 50% of all living beings at random, including half the population on planet Earth, remained reversed, so unsnapped if you will. In order to bring everyone back, the heroes needed to time travel to retrieve the Infinity Stones and use them to create their own Infinity Stone Gauntlet. Then the question came of, who was going to wield it. The Hulk was the one to bring back everyone using the gauntlet, but Thanos from the past returned to threaten the heroic plans of the Avengers. He attempted to guarantee that his future self's plot, and really his own plot, remained successful, but Tony managed to get rid of him, wielding the gauntlet himself and using it to wipe out Thanos and his army with his own snap. Unfortunately, because Tony Stark is just a man at the end of the day, the amount of energy this required ended up killing him, despite him wearing his Iron Man armor at the time. Number 6. Dark Avengers kill Tony Stark's evil brain. In issue 190 of the Dark Avengers, we get a glimpse into the pocket reality of Earth 13584, where New York is one of the last vestiges of human civilization that various superhero factions fight for power over. One such faction is led by an evil Iron Man who is now just a brain. His armor was crushed by a giant Janet Van Dyne of the same pocket dimension reality. As his brain ejected from the armor, Trickshot of the Dark Avengers, Barney Barton, Clint's brother, shot the brain with an arrow, killing this alternate version of Tony Stark. Number 5. Captain America kills Steel Corpse. In an alternate reality belonging to Age of X, Tony Stark became consumed by a virus which fused him with his suit, causing him to slowly be digested by it. Ew. Formerly known as Iron Man, Tony adopted the mantle of Steel Corpse following this, which he thought was more appropriate considering, well, he was basically just a corpse in an armor. He joined the Avengers team in their mission to exterminate mutants, but when they decided to rebel against their mission directive, saving mutants instead, an emergency override system caused Stark to be unable to follow suit with the rest of his teammates. Stark told Captain America to save the mutants they were targeting, which he knew meant that Cap would be forced to kill him.
Number 4. Undead Avengers. The living are not welcome on Earth 666, and the world is only consisting purely of the dead, undead, or supernatural beings. Vampires, werewolves, mummies, and more all exist here, and each group is divided into separate factions. But don't fear, the greatest heroes from across these groups are assembled together to protect this world. They are the Undead Avengers. This team is so cool. A Captain America who never recovered from being a werewolf, a part spider Natasha Romanoff, a devil Daredevil, a mummified Thor the Accursed who wields the backwards Mjolnir that casts black anti-magic energy, Vampire Wolverine, Hawkeye, Franken-Castle? I mean, come on. These guys come into conflict with Captain Britain when trying to defend the Orb of Necromancy in order for them to spread undeath across all of reality. And they first appear in Secret Avengers number 33.
Number 3. Steve Rogers kills Superior Iron Man. During the events of Time Runs Out, as a final incursion threatened the very existence of the entire planet and universe, Superior Iron Man and old Steve Rogers came to blows. They were fighting about the controversial actions of the one secret organization of brilliant minds known as the Illuminati. Also, Superior Iron Man is just kind of a jerk, so it makes sense that Captain America would be like, I'm gonna fight you, you're evil. Captain America had declared Iron Man and the Illuminati enemies due to their actions, and as such, the two heroes and former friends had come to blows over the argument. Just as the world was about to end, these two fought each other to death, both being taken out by a helicarrier during their fight in their last moments before everything reset. And then Battleworld happened. Woo! Number 2. Young Tony Stark kills older Tony Stark. During the events of The Crossing, a wildly crazy story, it is revealed that Tony was a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror, who he later found out was actually a Mortis in disguise, posing as Kang. Evil older Tony kills tons of people before the Avengers attempt to stop him by bringing back a younger version of himself from the past who they hope can help to stop their Tony. This didn't quite work out as they planned, but in the end, older Tony and fake Kang were defeated when older Tony, inspired by younger Tony, decided to sacrifice himself, switching back to the side of the heroes right before he died. With older Tony dead, it was decided that younger Tony would stay in the future and take his place. Number 1. Tony Stark kills immoral Tony Stark. A crazy turn of events came about that led young Tony Stark to effectively make himself brain dead in the comics in the Invincible No More story. Following Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn created Hammer in the place of S.H.I.E.L.D. and created his own Avengers, which we know as the Dark Avengers, mainly comprised of villains who adopted heroic personas to mirror that of the original Avengers team. To prevent Osborn from getting a hold of information that was gathered from heroes during the events of the first Civil War as part of the Superhuman Registration Act, Stark transferred the files from S.H.I.E.L.D. computers to his own brain, and then later wiped his own mind completely, making him brain dead. Tony would later return, but not really as the same version of himself. This Tony Stark would not have the knowledge of his actions during the first Civil War. How convenient.
Number 10. Age of X Avengers. In the Age of X storyline, the mutant population were feared, and after a phoenix-shaped explosion leveled Albany, the culling of the mutants began. In response to this, the mutant Magneto used his powers to literally steal several buildings from New York and form Fortress X, a safe haven for mutant kind. This led to the creation of a team of non-mutant heroes by General Frank Castle, and led by Captain America, to hunt down this resistance of mutants. The team was made up of Captain America, Ghost Rider, who was killed prior to the actual assault on Fortress X, the Hulk, Invisible Woman, Redback, who is this universe's Jessica Drew, and Iron Man / Steel Corpse. While the team murdered a lot of mutants, Cap eventually called them off to instead defend the mutants, which activated Steel Corpse's Code Omega, causing them to take him out. There was also Plan B, which was the 2 megaton chemical that was carried by the Hulk. Luckily, the mutant population survived this twisted Avenger team.
Number 9. The Avengers kill Iron Man. Okay, so the Avengers weren't solely responsible for his death this time around, but they definitely were the ones who caused it to happen. at least in part. During the events of Armor Wars, Iron Man became branded a criminal by the United States government. Among those opposing the vigilante were fellow Avenger Captain America. This, however, happened at a time where Tony Stark was not known to be Iron Man. His identity remained a secret, and Stark simply claimed that the man in the suit was actually his bodyguard, often remote controlling the suit to kind of make it appear as though they were in the same place at the same time, so no one would question his explanation of the identity for Iron Man. In the end, Stark decided, because of being declared an outlaw, to kill Iron Man, claiming that the man in the suit was named Randall Pierce, and staging Pierce's death by allowing an empty remote-controlled piloted suit to be destroyed during a confrontation with the government. This would later allow Tony to reveal himself as Iron Man, though he would at first claim another employee of his had simply taken up the mantle. But we knew the truth. It was really Tony in that suit, once again.
Number 8. Deathlock Nation. On Earth 11045, the superhumans grew out of control. They began to take the law into their own hands, more and more, acting as judge, jury, and executioner. This led to popular support from the people for Operation Deathlock. Operation Deathlock was a plan conceived by Weapon Infinity of the Weapons Plus breeding facility called the World, to convert all superhumans into Deathlocks. The project began small, with a few normal human Deathlocks, and then those Deathlocks targeted specific heroes who were killed and then converted into super Deathlocks. No hero could stand for long, and soon, all superheroes were converted into mindless police robots, which actually resulted in a utopia. Eventually, these Deathlocks began spreading into other timelines and realities, only to be stopped by Apocalypse. This eventually led a team composed of Deathlock Captain America, Cyclops, Spider-Man, Elektra, Hawkeye, and the Thing to come into conflict with Earth 616.
Number 7. Cadaverous Avengers. Cadaverous Avengers were part machine, part man, and all influenced by the villainous Cadaverous. They show up in whatever alternate world J.J. Abrams and his son Henry Abrams' Spider-Man series is relegated to. I don't think it has an official number yet. It does have a temporary reality number though. This team seemed hell-bent on getting revenge on Iron Man, the only surviving Avenger left in this world. Well, I guess Peter was still alive at this point, and I mean, he's normally a part of the Avengers team, at least at some point, but I mean, in terms of the standard Avengers cast, we've all come to familiarize ourselves with through various forms of media, including the films. I mean, especially the films in this case, just based on the roster. These villainous corpse versions of the former heroes face off against the old Iron Man, Ironheart, Spider-Man's son Ben Parker, and his powerless but enthusiastic friend and love interest, Faye Ito, or is it Ito Faye? Needless to say, these evil counterparts at least weren't in control of themselves, but instead were being influenced by Cadaverous to fight against their former friend and colleague with the use of old Stark Tech neurochips.
Number 6. The Gatherers. The Gatherers are a team of former Avengers of different alternate realities who survived their world's destruction, tricked by an alternate reality Black Knight named Proctor into believing that their world's Circes were to blame. Proctor united them together and gave them a single enemy, the Circe of Earth 616. The team consisted of alternate reality versions of Proctor, Rick Jones, the Thing or Korg, Swordsman, Black Panther, and the Vision, as well as some unknown original villains. But for them to carry out their vengeance, each member had to kill their Earth 616 counterpart within a certain amount of time, or they would die from cellular breakdown. What the members of the Gatherers did not know is that their leader, Proctor, was responsible for the destruction of each world they are from, as he drove that world's Circe into madness, causing her to lash out and destroy everything around her, all because of a bad breakup. Damn, dude!
Number 5. Android Ultimates. The Android Ultimates come from Ultimates 3. They make their first appearance in issue number 4 of the Ultimates 3 series. This is where we first learn that these Ultimates aren't really the Ultimates at all, but replacements built by Ultron to act just like them. His plan is to use the team of robotic hero impersonators to destroy man and help the machines of the world rise up. Really all machines too. There's a weird part where they're talking about like, we as machines are just seen as these tools. Us toasters, we will unite. It's like very strange. Of course, the Ultimates themselves will have a few things to say about that whole plan. Ultron styles himself after his father Ant-Man, but he and his team wouldn't make it past the next issue. It would later be revealed that their leader Ultron wasn't actually fully in control, but instead was being puppeted by Dr. Doom. So many reveals where people are actually being controlled by someone else.
Number 4. Swordsman. The Swordsman was Hawkeye's mentor and a criminal who tried to join the Avengers just so they could take advantage of the benefits. When they turned him away, he was approached by Iron Man's arch enemy, the Mandarin, who gave him a new sword and a special mission. to infiltrate the Avengers and destroy them from the inside. Mandarin engineered a plot to trick the Avengers into thinking that Iron Man had vouched for the Swordsman. The ploy actually worked, and Swordsman was allowed entry, but not without gaining the suspicion of his new teammates. And honestly, rightly so, because Swordsman planted a bomb in Avengers Mansion, just as he was told to, but began to have second thoughts because of the feelings he developed for Scarlet Witch. When he tried to remove the bomb, he was caught by Captain America and forced into a fight. Despite the Swordsman's betrayal, years later he was actually forgiven and welcomed back onto the team alongside his wife Mantis. Honestly, I really think the Avengers are just a little bit too trusting sometimes.
Number 3, Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers technically hail from Earth 616, but they are a completely alternate team when it comes to their roster and in general their backstory and motives. Well, that is, in a way, the Dark Avengers do attempt to do good, but they are just all approaching it from a more villainous side. And many of the team members don't do good for the sake of doing good, but have their own ulterior motives. So can we really call that good? That's a philosophical question for you. The Dark Avengers were introduced when Norman Osborn was given reign over the heroic team after he'd been declared a hero for killing the Skrull Queen Veronki. Aside from getting to build his own Avengers team, which would replace the previous one, S.H.I.E.L.D. had been disbanded and Osborn was allowed to create his own organization to replace it, using the acronym HAMMER, which really doesn't stand for anything. Osborn just thought it sounded cool, so that's not really an acronym, it's just capitalized letters at that point. He pulled together his own Avengers team, which publication-wise became known as the Dark Avengers, composed of various Marvel villains, anti-heroes, and misled heroes in some cases, or heroes who were just like really lost at the time, who Osborn united when the standard Avengers hero members refused to join his team. He did try though. He was like, hey Carol, come be on this team. She was like, hell no.
Number 2. Zombie Galacti. I think most of us are familiar with Earth 2149, which is the home of the Marvel Zombie storyline. Here, a separate reality zombie-infected sentry was sent by his Earth's Watcher. The Avengers were the first on the scene and quickly died or were infected, with the rest of the population falling quickly afterwards. Once the Herald of Galactus, the Silver Surfer, showed up to announce the arrival of Galactus, he was consumed by Hulk, Wolverine, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Giant Man, Power Man, and Captain America, who absorbed his powers and used it to toast other zombies to improve their flavor. Gordon Ramsay would not approve. The Zombie Galacti used the machine to unite their power cosmic to take down Galactus, and after fighting their zombie villains, consumed and absorbed his power too, using it to spread the infection throughout the whole of their universe.
Number 1. Revengers. The Cancerverse Avengers, known as the Revengers, hail from a reality where the world was turned upside down by the fact that death was defeated. I know, how can you kill death? Well, apparently when you make deals with elder god-like beings, anything is possible, like what happened here. And a bit to save Captain Marvel from life-threatening cancer, a deal was struck with the many-angled ones. As a result, Death ended up dead, which actually resulted in the whole universe becoming a perverted version of itself. You'd think without Death around, the universe would become like a paradise. But no, it became rank with disease that spread and basically couldn't die, becoming known as the Cancerverse. All the heroes who remained here were made to serve the many-angled ones, becoming their loyal servants and attempting to invade other universes eventually and conquer them in the name of their Lovecraftian horror-esque gods, Avengers included, or Revengers included.
Number 10. Tony Stark. Yet another time where Tony has gone off the rails a little bit, this time taking place in the Axis event, in which the morality of Earth's heroes and villains were reversed by magic. While the spell was undone, the now corrupt Tony managed to shield himself and thus retained his evil personality, even though most of Earth's heroes reverted back to their usual selves. With his still vast intellect and suave personality, this darker Tony was able to infiltrate society and build an empire for himself, growing into an egotistical monster, releasing the Extremis 3.0 virus to the public as an app, addicting people to the substance and then depriving them of any further upgrades until they paid his fee of $100 per day. This caused a ton of suffering as a large portion of society basically became addicts and were enslaved to Tony's will. Now, like I said though, this Tony retained his intelligence. He knew exactly what he had to do to balance his cruelty in order to prevent the world from rising up against him. So he engaged in hostile takeovers of many companies, forcing them to promote his extremist apps through blackmail, and even went as far as unleashing an army of advanced drones to act as personal police force. By every definition of the word, he just became a tyrant.
Number 9. Ultimate Avengers. Not to be confused with the Ultimates, who are very much their own thing. This team of Avengers is actually called the Avengers, but is not the Avengers equivalent from the 1610 Ultimate Universe. Are you confused yet? Basically, in the Ultimate Universe, the Avengers team that we know and love from 616 is a little different, including in name. On Earth 1610, the Earth's mightiest heroes go by the name of the Ultimates and are pretty buddy-buddy with S.H.I.E.L.D. and its director Nick Fury. However, there is a team in this universe that uses the Avengers moniker, but they are quite different from the Avengers we know from Earth 616. On 1610, the Avengers team is more like DC's Suicide Squad. The team is made up of characters who are seen as more disposable by S.H.I.E.L.D. and who are more anti-heroes or just straight up villains. They are a black ops team who is usually brought on for less publicly marketable missions and jobs.
Number 8. Avenger X. When the Avengers initially sought out to track down the Stranger alongside the X-Men, Professor X used Cerebro to locate and rescue Cressida from the cosmic being, and upon first glance, she seemed like the perfect weapon. Her powers augmented the strength and abilities of her teammates, allowing them to take on groups of supervillains with ease. As she was explaining what she was capable of, Scarlet Witch cut her off and just offered her a spot on the team, which honestly made sense because who wouldn't want someone like that on their team? But what they didn't realize is that there was actually a huge cost that comes along with her powers. In order to empower anybody and increase their abilities, she has to drain the lives of everyone and everything around her. And while they were unaware of this, Cressida was plotting to use this power of hers to finally end the Avengers for good, taking them down from the inside by absorbing their powers instead of empowering them. Captain America was the one who confronted Avenger X, and with her plot to divide the Avengers folded, Cressida disclosed the true extent of her abilities by siphoning the Avengers' life force and utilizing their combined powers to quickly defeat them. Number 7. Vision. Now if you know Vision, then you know that he's not usually one to betray his team unless there is a quote-unquote perfectly logical reason for it. There was the time after he linked up with a supercomputer from Titan and he thought the only way he could protect Earth was for him to run it himself. At first he only wanted some additional power and he helped Hawkeye establish the West Coast Avengers to expand the Avengers' influence, and even met with the leader of the free world about making the leader of the Avengers a cabinet position. When his schemes didn't give him the control he wanted in Avengers number 253, he took over nearly every computer on the planet, starting with the machines that controlled the world's weapons, and he went, let's just say, a little bit crazy with power. Interestingly enough though, that wasn't the only time Vision betrayed the Avengers, as there was a time that his actions cost the Avengers the trust of the federal government. Vision's difficulties with balancing his emotions got the best of him after he became the leader of the team. In trying to create world peace, Vision tried to control the world's computers and defense systems. He was opposed by the Avengers, who had to launch an attack on their own headquarters just to defeat him. Vision eventually realized his mistake and tried to atone for his crime, but unfortunately the damage was already done. Number 6. Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff started off his costume career as Quicksilver on the wrong side of the law, working with his sister Wanda on Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Eventually deciding to reform, Pietro and Wanda would join the first new lineup of the Avengers alongside another former criminal, Hawkeye, under the leadership of Captain America. Quicksilver blamed the Avengers for his strained relationship on his sister and his wife, and he gave government information to get back at them. In 1986, the East and West Coast Avengers were playing baseball when they received a surprise visit from the Freedom Force, a group of X-Men and villains released from prison to work for the government. Mystique, leader of the Freedom Force, announced to the Avengers that they were to be arrested for treason. And after a fierce battle with the Freedom Force, Captain America agreed to surrender. At a hearing, the Avengers were told that someone had obtained proof that Vision's attempt to gain control of the world's computers was actually a plot engineered by the Avengers themselves. And the Avengers demanded to know who their accuser was, and after much suspense, the traitor was revealed to be none other than Quicksilver. Number 5. Sandman. To his merit, Sandman did actually make an attempt to reform. He received a full pardon for all his misdeeds and even served as a reserve member of the Avengers for a time. During his run as a hero, he was actually able to make friends with his former enemy Spider-Man, but sadly good things don't last forever, not even in comic books. In 1999, Sandman turned his back on his fellow heroes and joined up with his old partners from the Frightful Four, Wizard, and Trapster. It wasn't entirely his fault since the Wizard used his ID machine to bring out the evil side of Sandman once again, but still. Sandman used the trust he had gained with Spider-Man to his advantage, allowing him a chance to take him by surprise. In returning to his villainous ways, Sandman not only betrayed Spider-Man, but the Avengers as well, causing his membership to be revoked.
Number 4. Captain Marvel kills Tony Stark. During the events of Civil War II, we saw Tony Stark's Iron Man and Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel butt heads over what the best decision would be when it came to using or not using the Inhuman Ulysses' future vision. This all happened after Carol had been attempting to fight Thanos, whom Ulysses had predicted would return, and during the fight, Rhodey, aka War Machine, machine was killed. Carol was for using Ulysses' visions to prevent possible catastrophic events, whereas Tony was against punishing or arresting people based solely on Ulysses' visions, which he thought might be flawed. The Civil War ended with Carol seemingly killing Tony, though it was later revealed he was still alive but in a coma, and then of course later on he woke back up and he would actually even come to forgive Captain Marvel. And now they don't really talk about the fact that that all happened.
Number 3. Dr. Druid. While most would consider Dr. Druid to be a pretty obscure member of the Avengers, he's actually spent enough time with the team to make his eventual betrayal memorable. Dr. Druid is a sorcerer who practices Celtic magic that he picked up from the Ancient One. His magical abilities are overshadowed by another one of the Ancient One's peoples, Doctor Strange of course. I know it seems like he is just a minor character, but trust me, he is not. Dr. Druid was still a fairly new addition to the Avengers when he had the sudden impulse to become its leader. He started out by undermining the current leader, Captain Marvel, aka Monica Rambeau. He questioned every move she made and constantly stated that the Avengers needed a much stronger leader. And when Captain Marvel had to temporarily step down for medical reasons, Dr. Druid used his mental powers to manipulate the Avengers into electing him as the leader in Avengers number 294. And in this time he also forced She-Hulk to fight her fellow Avengers, which ultimately led to her quitting the team. As it turned out though, Druid himself had been under the control of Kang's wife Ravonna, who used him to gain control of the rest of the Avengers, and after Druid was defeated and lost in the time stream, the Avengers actually disbanded for a while. Number 2. Wonder Man. The ionic energy-powered superhero Wonder Man has a long history with the Avengers that goes all the way back to his debut in Avengers number 9 in 1964, the same issue in which he also died. Wonder Man was resurrected years later and has become a staple in the Avengers ever since, either serving on the main Avengers team or in the West Coast branch. When Simon Williams first joined the Avengers, his life actually depended on betraying them, and here I'll explain why. Wonder Man acquired his powers from Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil. Zemo used an experimental ionic ray to give him his powers, but the effects would end him if he didn't receive a weekly antidote. In order to get that antidote, Wonder Man had to infiltrate the Avengers' ranks and deliver them to the Masters of Evil. Wonder Man led his new team into an ambush, but changed his mind when the fighting started. He helped the Avengers defeat the Masters of Evil even though it meant giving up the antidote. Without Zemo's antidote, Wonder Man seemingly perished, but would eventually return and rejoin the Avengers. Another instance of betrayal by Wonder Man took place in the 2000s when he started being much more aggressive and hateful towards his former teammates. He believed that the Avengers were a disease that was destroying the world instead of making it better. The tension between Wonder Man and the Avengers came head to head when he gathered a team called the Revengers, a small group of heroes and villains with bitter feelings towards the Avengers. Wonder Man led his team in an all-out assault against the Avengers. When Wonder Man was defeated though, it was determined that his ionic energy was actually having an effect on his brain. And when he was finally cured, Wonder Man just apologized for all the trouble he caused, but he still was a traitor nonetheless. And number 1, the Protector. Novar is a Kree soldier who sided with Earth during the Secret Invasion. After taking the name Captain Marvel, the same name used by the Kree hero Mar-Vell, he joined Osborn's Avengers. After leaving the team, he became a member of the official Avengers team as the Protector. He served them very well for a time, and until Avengers vs. X-Men, which saw the world threatened by the coming of the Phoenix Force. The Avengers needed all hands on deck, meaning it was a bad time for one of their own to turn into a traitor. He betrayed the Avengers during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, although he didn't actually side with the X-Men. If the Protector had his way, he would have helped the Avengers stop the Phoenix Force and continued to serve on their team. But as a Kree warrior, Novar felt compelled to comply with the Supreme Intelligence, who ordered him to steal the Phoenix Force sample from the Avengers and deliver it to the Kree Empire. Novar obeyed, even though the sample was a critical piece of the Avengers' plan to stop the Phoenix Force. When the Protector learned the Kree wouldn't honor their responsibility to protect Earth, he stole the sample back and wanted to rejoin the Avengers. The Avengers, however, wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, and honestly, I can't blame them.